That night, the silence felt like a well-assembled system, no unnecessary noise, no rattling, no human error. Only the steady hum of a fan and the occasional, almost bashful click of keys, as if the room itself was afraid to interfere with what was happening on the screen. Alex Severin had long since stopped believing in inspiration. He believed in invariance, the few things that held even when the whole world around you changed beyond recognition. In signatures you could not forge, and in chains you could not break without leaving a trace. And yet, for the last few weeks, his code had carried an insistent, almost physical sense of someone else's hand. Not a virus, not a backdoor, not some cheap sabotage line, more like a discipline, like the measured rhythm of footsteps on a stone floor in a monastery corridor. Too even. Too old. Too perfect to be an accident. He ran the test again, and on the screen, so familiar it was almost boring, lines of logs began to stream, signals, tags, confirmations. Then something happened that, at first, could have passed for bad data. The transactions returned to their starting point. Not sometimes, not roughly. They returned perfectly, like a circle drawn with a compass, like a loop someone had tightened deliberately and carefully so there would be no knot, no tail. Alex frowned and, without thinking, rubbed the pad of his thumb along the edge of the trackpad, a gesture that showed up every time his brain shifted into pure calculation. He checked the inputs, checked the cache, rebuilt the module, and ran the test again. The circle repeated, flawless, soundless, relentless. So he did what he always did when he no longer trusted words, he drew. A diagram flared to life on the screen, nodes and arrows, the dry geometry of mutual trust, and in that geometry, for a single moment, something surfaced that had no business being there. A pattern his mind recognized before it could explain itself. A seal. For a fraction of a second, like a phantom, like the aftertaste of bright light, and still, a seal. The same shape he'd seen earlier that day in a browser tab when, on a strange whim, he'd searched for images of medieval sigils, trying to understand why his architectural artifacts sometimes assembled into symbols, as if obeying an invisible logic. His shoulders tightened. Alex reached to close the tab, as if it could be responsible for this glitch, and at that exact moment the screen blinked and threw up a notification, dry and impersonal, like a court order. Your access is being moved into integrity review. Stop work immediately. He stared at the words the way you stare at a stranger's hand suddenly landing on your shoulder in an empty room. Then, fast, almost nervously, he tried to log into his corporate account, to see if it was just a hiccup, a system mistake. The password worked. The verification code arrived. The system paused for a beat, and delivered something else, colder than fear, user not found. Alex blinked, refreshed the page. Again. Again. The screen seemed to hesitate, as if choosing which version of reality to hand him, and finally offered a third, even more absurd line, account temporarily unavailable. Account recovery showed that the backup email was not his anymore. In place of his address sat a neat, foreign combination of letters, like someone had quietly swapped the nameplate on a door and acted as if it had always been that way. He sat perfectly still, feeling the blood drain from his face, not even from fear, exactly, but from the strange, almost mathematical logic of it all. He had not been hacked. He'd been replaced. His phone buzzed in the same instant, a call from a colleague. The voice was low, and there was guilt inside that low tone, the way there is in someone who brings bad news and hopes it will dissolve into the air on its own. Alex, where are you? Did you hear? Something happened to the boss. Alex opened his mouth, but could not find the question at first. Another part of his mind had already kicked in, the part that grabbed details and snapped them into a grim, inevitable chain. What do you mean, happened? He finally forced out. His voice sounded foreign, distant. An accident. They processing everything. They told us not to discuss it while the review is running. The word processing hit him unexpectedly hard, not helping, not figuring it out, but processing, like paperwork, like a status change in a soulless system where even death became one more procedure. Alex slowly lifted his eyes to the diagram with its circle, to the phantom seal, to the compliance notice, and understood it was too clean, too smooth, too correct. He had not even had time to close his mouth when the laptop made another short, dry sound, a repository notification, a line in the corner, a new commit, a new package, author, his mentor's name. Timestamp, present tense. Practically now. Alex did not believe his eyes. His hands reached for the keyboard on their own. He opened it, and inside, instead of code, there was a message. Short. No greeting. No explanation. As if his mentor had not written it as a letter, but as a final command, they found the Philosopher's stone. It is not alchemy. It's code. Do not let them run it. Then a signature line, Paupers Camillitones Christi. And below, one more line, no longer command-like. Human. Almost quiet. If you rereading this, check what you remember. The adjacent archive looked ordinary, a bundle of files, diagrams, lists. Only one document had a strange name, as if it had been titled not for its contents, but for its meaning, continuity. Alex unpacked it and opened a funding schematic, expecting the usual corporate web, funds, trusts, bridges, transit companies, everything meant to hide rather than reveal. But this graph was different. It did not hide. It assembled. Alex zoomed in, leaned back in his chair, and this time the seal did not flash like a phantom. It stood in the diagrams like the correct answer, like the only possible conclusion. Nodes and arrows closed into the same pattern he had seen in his test diagram, as if someone had built this chain not for efficiency and not for protection, but for the shape itself, for an ideal, flawless design. A seal in the books. A seal in the code. A sudden, icy sensation washed over him. He was not holding proof. He was holding an invitation, thin, polite, almost elegant. The kind you do not refuse, because the refusal itself becomes an answer, an admission that you saw it and understood. His phone rang again. The number did not show, just a faceless string of digits. Alex hit accept and heard a woman's voice, even and cold, like on-screen text. Alex Severin? Patricia Sloan, compliance. You need to stop any actions involving corporate materials immediately. This is for your safety. He wanted to ask about his mentor, about the accident, about how a person could commit code after they were gone, but his tongue chose something else, simpler, more desperate. Why does it say? User not found. A pause answered him. Not surprise, not hesitation, just the pause of someone selecting from a set of pre-approved, sharpened phrases. A procedure is in progress, Sloan said, soft, almost gentle. We re-obligated to minimize fallout. Any independent action will be treated as a violation of the protocol. Alex clenched his teeth, trying to keep at least the appearance of control. You understand this is, he began, but her voice cut across his, calm and unyielding. Speed is part of protection. Then, after the faintest delay, she added, lowering her tone to something almost like a confidential whisper, and, Alex, what do you remember about last night? His fingers went cold. The world swayed for a beat. The call ended as smoothly as it had begun. The phone screen went dark, leaving him alone with the diagrams, the mentor's archive, and his own memory, suddenly fragile, unreliable, like paper about to meet flame. He stood, threw on his jacket as if rough fabric could offer any real protection, and caught his reflection in the black glass of the monitor. Ordinary face, tired eyes, a man who had spent too long treating the world like a problem and had just discovered the problem was watching back, studying him, calculating him. Somewhere far away, across the ocean, in another life, people had called him something else, Lyosha, Lyosha, a name that did not fit neatly into American forms and so stayed behind, like a scar under clothing, like a quiet ache you were not supposed to mention. He had not heard it spoken aloud in years, and yet now, when the system refused to recognize him in its memory, he wanted to cling to at least that, to his real name, his real self, to what could not be erased with a single command. He stepped into the hallway, and the electronic lock on the door, the one that always greeted him with a quick green light, did not light up this time. He tapped his key again. And again. The LED flashed red. Silent. Final. On the landing stood a security guard, polite, calm, the kind of person paid not to notice other people's panic. "Sorry," the guard said, eyes still on his tablet. "Your badge is not in the system. Maybe you recently left the company?" The line sounded so ordinary that, for a second, Alex felt less like someone in trouble and more like someone who simply mixed up the day of the week, made a small, ridiculous mistake. He tried to smile. It came out wrong, crooked, unnatural. "It's an error," he said. The guard only shrugged with that professional neutrality that makes the inside of you go empty, cold, airless. "I not let you through without confirmation." Procedure. Procedure. The word was everywhere now, like a new law of physics, an unavoidable force that did not ask, only declared. Alex backed away, pulled out his phone, opened his banking app, and instead of numbers, instead of familiar graphs, saw grey placeholders. Then a short, impersonal line, transaction suspended. He hit call. The automated system requested verification. He passed it, mechanically, like a robot, and heard a female operator's voice, almost as even as Sloane Bess had been. "We not discuss details. It's a standard review." "Who initiated it?" Alex asked, working to keep his voice calm, though it sounded to him like someone else's voice, distant and wrong. "I do not have that information." "Can you at least tell me how long?" "We not discuss details," the operator repeated. And in that repetition, in that soft, almost gentle sameness, there was something frightening. Something infinitely foreign. He ended the call standing by a door that did not know him, and for the first time he felt not just anxiety, but what anxiety usually hides, total, absolute powerlessness. He went back to the laptop and opened Continuity. Inside was an instruction set, short, no theatrics, just a series of dry, almost bureaucratic bullet points, written like someone who did not believe in words and trusted only traces, only facts, only what you could touch. Make an image. Export offline. Do not use the network. Do not trust the cloud. Do not trust the interface. Check what you remember. Alex obeyed, because sometimes obedience becomes the only way to resist. He cut the internet, saved the files to an external drive, built a local copy of the graph, opened it, and froze. The file was slightly different. Not enough to scream swap, not enough to prove interference with certainty, but one fund name looked different than it had a minute earlier, and one relationship arrow had shifted to a neighboring node, like an invisible hand had smoothed his evidence, corrected a wrinkle, made it cleaner, more proper, closer to some ideal form. A familiar wave of engineer's anger rose in him, the kind that usually birthed solutions, found bugs, broke systems. But this time the anger had nothing to hook into. This was not an attack on hardware, not a breach, not a substitution. It felt like interference with the right of a fact to be a fact, with the fabric of reality itself, suddenly pliable, changeable, obedient to someone's unseen will. He needed motion, any shift in position, any proof he still had a choice, still could decide something. He called a cab, but the app answered with its friendly interface smile and a short, impersonal phrase, payment error. He tried another card. Card invalid. Another service. Profile locked. A city that had always sold him movement for a few taps suddenly became immobile, not hostile, just unavailable, as if a thick, opaque sheet of glass had dropped between him and the world. He went into a pharmacy, not because he needed medicine, but because he wanted to test something simple, domestic, human. A basic transaction where nobody drew seals and nobody rewrote memory. At the register he recited his insurance number, and the clerk, eye still on her screen, shrugged with the same indifference the guard had used when he said procedure. "You do not have active coverage," she said flatly. "That happens when someone changes employers. When someone." He stepped back outside. The air felt denser, heavier, saturated with invisible pressure, not because the temperature had dropped, but because a world that no longer confirmed his status was now demanding correct behavior from him, dictating rules in a game he was already losing before he even understood the board. His phone buzzed, an unknown number text, short and cryptic, "Do not make any sudden moves. You can still choose correctly." Alex stared at the screen and felt a strange, almost mystical sensation, as if the message was not a threat or advice, but a line from a carefully written script, like a hint in a game where someone already knew which mistake he was about to make, which turn he was about to take, which step he was about to choose. And then, as if on cue, another call came through. This number looked official, solid, like it belonged to people who got paid for security and called it mercy. The voice was male, warm, smiling, almost friendly. "Alex, my condolences," the man said softly. "Mark Van Doren. I represent a party that wants to make sure you are not harmed." "Who are you?" Alex asked, and his own voice came out rough, uncertain. "A man who closes risks," Van Doren replied evenly. "You do not need to understand the whole chain. You need to understand your role." Something inside Alex tightened, went cold. There was no threat in those words. No anger. Nothing you could point to and call hostile. And that was exactly what made them endlessly dangerous. "My role is to write code," Alex said dryly, grabbing for the last thing that still felt real, his true. Van Doren gave a faint, almost patronizing chuckle. "Your code is more than a product. It is a circuit. And the circuit must remain unbroken. Continuity. The same word from the mentor test document. The same word that seemed to hang in the air when Sloan asked about his memory. The same word that now sounded like a verdict, like a mantra, like the only law of this new, strange world. "What do you want?" Alex asked. His voice wavered, betraying exhaustion, confusion, fear. "For you to return to the circuit," Van Doren said, so gently it sounded like offering a cup of tea after a long, hard day. "Finish the work. And then many things will become simpler." "And if I do not?" The pause was brief, but inside that brief silence was something you could not explain with logic, something deep, ancient, instinctive. "Then you tell complicate everything," Van Doren said quietly, almost regretfully. "For yourself. And for those close to you." The line went dead as abruptly as it had started, leaving Alex standing on the street in the open, feeling not wind on his skin but attention, dense, invisible, everywhere. He pulled up his mentor's package again like a talisman, like last proof, like a rope thrown over a chasm, and remembered the line, "Check what you remember." He checked one small, insignificant fact about the previous evening, a message he knew he had desent, a file he knew he had decreated, a note he knew he had desaved to the cloud. And he found a mismatch. Not emotional. Not vague. Iron. A timestamp sat there as if the file had appeared before he'd even opened the app, before he'd touched the keyboard, before the thought had even entered his head. He exhaled slowly, and the words slipped out almost soundless, like a confession, like a prayer, like a sentence he was passing on himself. "The stone is already running." He powered down his phone, decided to go fully offline like his mentor had taught, like the instruction sheet advised, and immediately, as if by magic, he saw a man in glasses across the street stop too, freeze, as if he had been waiting for that exact motion, that exact decision. And then something else vibrated in his pocket, a work token, a backup device Alex had forgotten about back when the world had been honest, when the rules still seemed understandable. The screen lit up by itself, without his touch, and on a black background, in white, impersonal letters, a single sentence appeared: "If you bring this into the light, they won't not rewrite you. They'll rewrite everyone who believes you." Alex's mouth went dry. His heart sped up. The world blurred at the edges. He opened his mentor's package again, as if he could wring out one more ounce of meaning, one more hint, one more chance, and saw a line that had not been there before. So thin, almost invisible, as if it had been added at the exact moment he became ready to see it, when his mind finally crossed a threshold and stepped into a place where truth and fiction braided into one seamless pattern. "Do not let them run it," The first part read, familiar, expected. And below it, a second layer, almost a whisper, a secret entrusted only to the chosen, not for them. The knocking did not stop. It did not get louder. It did not demand, did not threaten, it simply repeated, with the same precision, the same rhythm as the circle in his logs, the same rhythm as transactions returning to their origin. Like someone was running an experiment. How many times do you have to knock before the door decides it's supposed to open, before the system admits its weakness, its obedience? Alex did not open it. He sat at the table while a white window on the screen hung in front of him like a blank form waiting for a signature, his consent, his surrender. Report preparation. He knew that language. That style. That impersonal, cold aesthetic. There was no anger in it, no hate, not even indifference, only an action already underway, one you could not stop with pleading, praying, or threats. It was like the laws of physics, relentless, objective, without feeling. He forced himself not to look at the door, not because he was not afraid, but because he understood, fear makes you do the obvious thing, reach for familiar solutions, run where someone is waiting for you. And in this game, obvious steps were the surest path to losing, to vanishing, to erasure. He opened continuity again and reread the points the way you reread contract terms when you realize there's a trap inside the smooth phrasing, a cliff edge hiding behind polite words. Image. Offline. No clouds. No interfaces. Check memory. Duplicate traces. And at the very end, almost like a postscript, almost like a personal note, there was a line he had skipped at first because it looked too human for an instruction sheet, too emotional for an algorithm. Do not answer questions you are not required to answer. He heard Sloane's voice in his head, soft, almost caring. What do you remember about last night? And Van Doren's smile he'd been able to hear through the phone, smile of someone who knew more than he said and said exactly as much as needed. You do not need to understand the whole chain. They were not asking. They were offering. Not demanding, offering a choice that was not really a choice. Alex did what he usually did when a system tried to impose a frame on him, shove him into a corridor of predetermined decisions. He changed the frame himself. He started with the simplest, most physical thing, the hardware. He did not toggle the router off with a button, did not use an interface. He pulled the plug from the wall, breaking the connection to the network, the connection to a world that now felt hostile, foreign. Then he unplugged the laptop's power cord, left it on battery, autonomous, independent, briefly free. He removed the external drive and set it beside him like a separate organ you could not fully trust but needed to survive, needed to preserve anything at all. Then he opened a drawer and pulled out an old, nearly forgotten notebook, paper, cardboard cover, yellowing pages. In another life, in a normal world, he would have laughed at himself, an engineer, a tech guy, a man of digits, writing by hand like a schoolkid, like an ancient scribe. But in this night, beneath the hum of silence and the steady knock at the door, paper suddenly became technology, old, primitive, dependable, because you could not hack it, could not patch it, could not erase it with a click. It was real. Tangible. Like stone. Like earth under your feet. The knock repeated, and stopped. Not for long, though, more like the person on the other side was listening, waiting for an answer, catching for sounds, breath, movement. Something moved quietly beyond the door, not sneaking, not hiding steps, just walking calmly, confidently, like there was nothing to conceal, like they had every right to be here doing this. Then silence again. But now it was different, filled with presence, attention, foreign will. Alex approached the door carefully, like approaching the edge of a drop, and looked through the peephole. The landing was empty. No person, no shadow, just the cold light of the fixture and familiar walls that suddenly seemed foreign, unfriendly. He opened the door only enough to reach the welcome mat and saw an envelope tucked beneath it, thick, no stamp, no return address. Only his name, Alex Severin. Typed in a machine font, like on a receipt, like on a form, like on the kind of document you get after someone has already processed you. He picked it up. His fingers automatically felt along the rough edge of the paper, as if checking whether it was real or just another phantom. Inside was a single sheet, ordinary office paper with the company logo at the top, the company where he worked, or where, according to the system, he worked yesterday until someone deleted him, replaced him, erased him. The text was short, dry, without emotion, notice of temporary suspension of duties. Reason, breach of protocol and potential compromise of project. You're instructed to remain available for questioning. Any destruction, copying, or dissemination of materials will be treated as a knowing violation of terms. Compliance. No signature. No name. Only a clean departmental stamp you might have taken for a routine corporate mark, if not for one detail, if not for that same rhythm of lines, the same geometry Alex recognized now inside the circle among the letters. Not a symbol shoved in your face. Not an obvious sign. A hint. A nudge only someone who had already seen the form would understand. He shut the door, leaned his shoulder blades against it, feeling the chill of the wood seep through his jacket, through skin, down into bone. The page in his hands trembled just slightly, not because he was shaking, but because paper was thin and alive, obeying physics instead of system logic. This was not an invitation to talk. It was not an offer to cooperate. It was a status update. A statement of fact: you are now an object of procedure, a case to close, a variable to zero out. Alex laid the page on the table beside the notebook. At that moment the laptop, still running on battery, blinked again, woke, as if sensing his attention. The report window vanished, dissolving as if it had never existed, and a new system notification opened, even simpler, even more impersonal: security policy update required. He froze as the cursor moved on its own, without his touch, to the accept button, large, green, friendly, like a salesperson's smile, like a helper's outstretched hand. Alex did not click it. His fingers hovered above the keyboard, and for a second he saw himself from the outside, in a strange, detached dream, a person who spent his whole life clicking accept because it was convenient, because it made work faster, life smoother, the world more understandable. And the same person who now understood, for the first time, that sometimes accept meant signing his own disappearance, agreeing to erasure, writing himself into a report already being drafted without him. The screen did not hurry him, did not coax, did not threaten. It simply waited, like a machine waits, like a system waits, infinitely patient, infinitely calm, because it has all the time in the world. Because it knows, sooner or later you will click. Because that's how people are built. Because that's how the world works. Alex looked down at the notebook, at the word he'd written first, the only anchor he had left, the only truth that still held, memory. He picked up his phone, the same one he'd wanted to turn off, throw away, forget, lit the screen, and the light stabbed his eyes, sharp, unbearable. He scrolled through recent messages until he found his thread with his mentor, the last words, the last check-in, the last edit, the last trace of a living person who was now gone, or alive, or something else that did not fit any familiar category. And he saw emptiness. The thread was short. Too short. As if they'd never talked that much, the way he remembered. As if all those hours of discussion, arguments, jokes, those small things human communication is made of, had vanished, evaporated, leaving behind only a handful of dry, impersonal okay and approved, like they were not people at all but bots exchanging signals. Something dull and heavy rose in Alex's chest, not panic, not hysteria, but a bodily sense of loss, like vertebrae being pulled one by one while you expected to stand straight and look ahead and act like everything is fine, because if you do not, you fall apart. He took a screenshot on instinct, the reflex of anyone who had ever saved evidence, pinned a fact. The phone flashed a message back, error. Not enough storage. It was ridiculous. Absurd. He had plenty of space. But nothing about it was funny, because the same mechanism sat behind it as everything else. The world refused to preserve what it did not want, what contradicted its clean, correct version of events. Alex dropped the phone onto the table like it burned him. He crossed to the kitchen sink, driven by a physical need to do something simple, normal, human. He poured water, drank in big, greedy gulps. The water was cold and tasteless and too ordinary, the only piece of reality that, for the moment, was not trying to optimize him, was not trying to reshape him, was not trying to erase him. He returned to the table, to the funding graph, to the list of nodes, and understood something simple and terrifying: if memory can be rewritten, if the past can be edited like text, then you have to cling to what is hard to rewrite, almost impossible. External traces. Independent records. Things that exist outside the system, outside the digital world. People who do not belong to the circuit, who are not logged into its logic, who might still be alive, real, free. Ingrid. The name appeared in one of the mentor's files, not as a contact, not as a link, but as a signature under a forensic report, the mark of someone who read money not as numbers but as text, as stories, as patterns. Alex opened the list of nodes and did something that, on any other day, in any other life, would have felt like paranoia, madness, pointless caution. He copied part of it onto paper by hand. Slowly. Carefully. Fund names. Registration dates. Registry references, anything that could become a clue, proof, an anchor in a world where facts had turned pliable like clay and memory had become fragile as glass. As he wrote, letters forming under the pen with almost religious care, the phone buzzed again, quiet but insistent, like a summons. He did not want to pick it up, did not want to hear, did not want to answer, but his body moved faster than his mind, his fingers closing around cold plastic. Unknown number. No name. No label. Just a line of digits that could belong to anyone, or no one. Alex did not answer. A voicemail notification popped up instead, no transcript, no description, just an icon pulsing with a small, stubborn light. He hit play. And froze, as if a live wire had touched him, as if the world had stopped and held its breath. It was his mentor's voice. Rougher than usual, tired, like it had been recorded on the run, in haste, in fear. It held none of the calm confidence his mentor always used when he explained, guided, taught. Only the urgency of someone who knows time is gone, that the clock is down to minutes, seconds. Alex. The voice paused, as if choosing a word, searching for the right one, then said another name, softer, more personal, more real, like it was not meant for foreign ears, for systems, for protocols. Lyosha, listen to me. Something inside Alex jerked, tightened, went still. He had not heard that word in years. It belonged to another life, another world, back when he was not Alex, not an employee, not a variable, but simply a person with a name, a history, an ache. If you have got this, the voice continued, and there was no sadness in it, only the flat certainty of a technical report, then I am not there with you anymore. They tell ask you questions. They tell be very polite. They tell talk about safety. Do not answer. A short inhale. A faint rustle, like he'd decovered the microphone, looked around, checked whether someone could hear. You tell see seals in the code. You tell think it is an injection. It is not. The seal is form. They rebuilding form through everything, money, documents, habits. Another pause, long, heavy, like he was hearing footsteps beyond a door, or counting seconds, or simply gathering the strength to say what mattered most. The philosopher's stone is not a key. It is a right. The right to rewrite trust. And when trust gets rewritten, everything else changes. His voice dropped, nearly a whisper, as if he was afraid of being overheard by the wrong people, or the wrong something. The most important part. Do not let them run it. That does not mean break it. It means, do not let the wrong people run it. Then, almost inaudible, like a superstition, like a spell, like a prayer, if you start remembering differently, you not losing your mind. They are retesting the circuit. Hold on to what they see, not recalculate. People. Paper. And a short laugh, with no joy in it, only bitter irony, your fear, if it's honest. The message cut off, leaving behind silence, thick, ringing, packed with meaning he still had to understand, unravel, accept. Alex did not move. He might as well have been stone, a statue, another piece of furniture. His heart beat evenly and loud, like a metronome measuring out the seconds, the minutes, the hours of this endless night. He held the phone as if pressure alone could squeeze more out of it, one more sentence, one more hint, one more fragment of truth slipping away like sand through his fingers. His mentor had called him Lyosha ***, which meant he had not been speaking to the system, not for a protocol, not for a report. He'd been speaking into a place the system was not supposed to reach, where its algorithms were helpless, where its logic stopped working. Into the human part. Into memory. Into the soul, into what you ca not patch with a security policy, ca not erase with a command, ca not swap out like a variable. Alex set the phone down beside the notebook, slowly, carefully, the way you lay a weapon on a table so you do not touch the trigger, so you do not do something you ca not undo. He wanted to do two things at once, two opposite things, two impossible things: call the police, shout, demand help, protection, justice, and call anyone at all who could say, **it's this a mistake. It's this random. It happens. And then everything would slide back into place, and the world would be understandable again, predictable, safe. But he'd already seen how this world worked. He'd already felt its laws like breath on the back of his neck. He'd watched a phone refuse to save a screenshot. Watched a bank stonewall him. Watched a door stop opening. Watched people stop recognizing him. He'd heard the word **procedure** not as a term, but as a verdict, a mantra, a law of this new reality. The police would ask, **what happened?** And he would say, **I do not exist in the system.** And he would hear, **that happens. A glitch. A mistake. Wait, we hell sort it out. But the ones who would sort it out would not be the ones who helped. They'd be the ones who filed it, logged it, stamped it. No. Not there. Not that way. That was not an exit. It was a trap, an alley with no end. He needed light, but not truth, not justice. He needed light as insurance, like a blade held at the throat of procedure. A threat you could not ignore. He remembered a name his mentor had mentioned once, half irritation, half respect, the way you talk about someone who stands too close to a forbidden door, who knows too much, who is dangerous because he is not afraid to speak, is not afraid to show what he finds, is not afraid to break rules. Edward Reed. A journalist with a YouTube channel, someone who turned chains into stories, and stories into armor, into leverage, into light. Alex opened the browser. The network was down, the router sat lifeless on the floor. Still, he brought it back for a second, like striking a match in total darkness, fast, before he could talk himself out of it, before fear could climb over his hands. Search. Closed archive. Edward Reed. Contacts. The site did not load right away, as if someone on the other end was deciding whether he had the right to see this page, whether he had access to this information, whether he was who he claimed to be. He managed to copy one address. Not official. Not corporate. Personal, almost accidental, like something tossed into the ocean in a bottle. And then the network died. Not dropped, not cut out, gone. As if the provider had decided his apartment was a blank space on the map, a sealed zone where rules did not apply and signals did not pass. He stared at the router. The indicator lights were dark, dead, like the eyes of an animal that was not breathing anymore. Procedure. System. Them. Alex lifted the notebook, took the pen, and in the margins, beside the names and facts he'd already written, added new words like markers on a map, signposts in a maze. Beside Edward, **insurance. Beside Ingrid, **map. And beside the word **circuit**, which now sounded like a sentence, a prison, a cage, **cage. He kept thinking about what his mentor had said, Asterisk hold on to what they see, not recalculate. Asterisk but what in his life, his American life, could not be recalculated? Everything he had here was numbers, tables, data, accounts, access, policies, subscriptions, ratings, reports, graphs. Even his name on his documents was a form, a template, a variable you could swap, correct, delete. Only one thing was not a form. Only one thing refused the math. His memory. His past. His self, the exact thing they were reaching for now, trying to touch, change, erase like unwanted files, like outdated data. He opened the refrigerator, not because he was hungry, not because he wanted food, but because he needed to do one movement no one could predict, something that did not fit into behavioral algorithms and action protocols. He took down a magnet holding a scrap of paper, an old grocery list written in his own hand from some other day, some other life, milk, bread, coffee, eggs. A nothing thing. A trivial, domestic detail he would tossed without thinking. Now he stared at it like a treasure. Like proof. Like an anchor. It was evidence that yesterday really had been asterisk yesterday. Asterisk that he'd been alive in the small, human ways, buying groceries, writing lists, being a person, not a variable, not a line in a report. He slid the list into the notebook beside his notes and diagrams and seals, an almost comically ordinary artifact of daily life amid conspiracies and symbols and ancient orders. And in that exact moment, when he almost convinced himself he'd found one stable point, one small island in all this chaos, he heard a sound again. Not knocking. Not a call. Something quieter. And worse, because it was close. Because it was here, inside his world, inside his fortress. A short click in the lock. Alex lifted his head and went still, staring at the door as if he could see through wood, through metal, through the illusion of safety. The door did not open. It did not even shiver. But he heard it, clear as a bell, the way someone tested the mechanism. Turned a key. Slipped in a pick. Or simply touched it with the confident, practiced ease of someone checking not asterisk if asterisk it would give, but asterisk when star. He stepped up to the door, pressed his ear to the cold wood, held his breath, listening for the smallest sound, the faintest shift, any sign of life on the other side. Quiet. Very quiet. But not completely. Through the thickness of the door and the hush of the night, he caught a voice, muffled, as if through fabric, through a wall, through a layer of reality separating him from them. He pressed inside, someone said, calm, without emotion, as if reading a censor. A second voice answered just as calmly, just as evenly, and there was something mechanical in it, something that did not feel human. Like an automated operator. Like a synthesizer. Warning was delivered. Continue per protocol. Alex backed away, cold sweat breaking along his spine. He recognized the tone, not the words, not the phrasing, but the tone itself. The same as Sloan. The same as the bank operator. The same as the system prompt on the screen offering a policy update. It was not a threat. It was not anger. It was not hate. It was execution, pure, emotionless, relentless execution of a procedure, an algorithm, a protocol that did not know doubt, did not know mercy, did not know anything human. He went back to the table and looked at the laptop, the funding graph, the blank notification windows, the lines from his mentor he'd written down, the voicemail that now felt like a drowning man's final shout, a last attempt to reach him in time. Asterisk do not answer. Asterisk asterisk do not let the wrong people run it. Asterisk he could not win with strength, he did not have strength. He had knowledge. He had a mind. He had memory, the very thing they were trying to erase. He could not win by filing complaints, there was no one to complain to. The world had gone deaf, blind, mute. He could win only one way, by doing what they did not expect. Not running. Not yelling. Not pleading. Something else. Quiet. Unnoticeable. And lethal, like a bug, like an error in code that will not show up right away, but when it does, it changes everything. He opened a text editor and created a new file, not inside the project, not inside the system, just on the desktop like a personal note, a rough draft, something insignificant. He named it the most boring thing he could think of, something that would disappear among system files and temp junk and digital trash, *** notes. Text ***. He did not write code. He did not write functions. He wrote truth. Dry. As a list. No drama. No decoration. The way you write incident notes. The way you write a record. What happened? What notifications came in? Which names he heard? What he saw on the screen? What he heard at the door? And separately, what he remembered, not what they wanted him to remember, but what was still inside his head, inside his bones, inside his blood. The lines came out short, clipped, but each one carried the steadiness of someone who had stopped doubting, who had found the one thing to hold and was holding it with everything he had. He did not interpret. He did not theorize. He documented, like you document evidence at a scene, like you photograph prints, like you collect proof. When he reached the line **, my mentor called me Lyosha, **, he stopped. He lifted his fingers from the keyboard and stared at the words as if they were sacred. Forbidden. Real. Because it was not just a memory, not just a fact from the past, it was confirmation that his past existed. That it was real. That it belonged to him, not to the system, not to procedure, not to the circuit. And someone was trying to cut it away like an extra wire. Like a useless part. Like an error that needed correction. He saved the file, then made 3 copies, one to the external drive, a cold slab of plastic and metal, one to paper, copying the key lines by hand like a cipher, like a spell, and one hidden where procedural people did not look and search algorithms did not reach, inside the root folder of an old, forgotten project with a meaningless, random name, buried deep on the hard drive like a time capsule, a message to the future, a shout into the void. Then he shut the laptop down. Not sleep. Not hibernate. A full shutdown. A severed chain. Silence. The screen went black. The light vanished. The room dropped into darkness, broken only by faint streetlight leaking through the window, and the quiet, persistent knock at the door that now sounded like a metronome, like a counter, like a sentence being read out loud. The silence grew thicker, denser, almost physical, like water in a deep lake, like air in a crypt. Outside the door, footsteps sounded again, close, very close, unhurried, unbothered, calm and confident, like the steps of an owner returning home. Someone stopped right at the door, and Alex felt goose flesh ripple down his spine, felt the hair at the base of his neck rise, felt his heartbeat quicken, louder, harder, desperate. And then a voice, calm, even, almost gentle, like a doctor, like a teacher, like someone who protects and saves, said, nearly in a whisper, but so clearly each word burned itself into his mind like a brand, Alex Severin. Open up. This is for your safety. Alex smiled, barely. Just the smallest twitch at the corner of his mouth. For the first time all night, for the first time in this nightmare, in this long standoff with a world that no longer recognized him, he smiled. Because now he understood the simplest, most terrible, most important thing, their strength was that they always sounded reasonable. They always offered logical, measured, safe solutions. They always spoke in the name of order and law and system. They never shouted. Never demanded. Never threatened. They offered. And that was their advantage. And it was also their weakness. So his chance, his weapon, his defense, had to be something else. Not sounding reasonable. Not sounding correct. Not sounding safe. Sounding like someone who documents. Someone who records. Preserves. Remembers. Someone who does not answer questions he is not required to answer. Someone who does not open the door because someone knocks. Someone who does not click accept just because the system offers a security policy update. Someone who simply exists. Remembers. Writes. He did not answer. Not a word. Not a sound. He did not move. He sat in the dark, staring at the door, listening to the silence, feeling his heart beat evenly, steady, controlled, sure. And in that silence, in that first conscious, voluntary, final no, he felt not fear, not despair, not helplessness. Something else, fragile and small, but real. Something like hope. Something like strength. Something like the beginning. The game had finally started. Morning did not arrive as light. It arrived as a notification, soft and impersonal, like a switch clicking in an empty room. Alex woke into a silence that was wrong. Cut too clean. As if someone had trimmed reality down, removed all the extra sounds and left only the bare framework of normal. In a normal world, morning has noise, pipes groaning, elevators sighing, voices in the hall, music behind a wall, laughter, arguments, people simply living. Here, it felt like the world had paused to listen, to watch, to wait. Even the air seemed denser, heavier, saturated with invisible attention. He lay still for a few seconds without opening his eyes, listening to himself the way an engineer listens to a machine, checking each part, each signal. His heart beat evenly. Not too fast, not too slow. Working like it should. His hands did not shake. His breathing was calm, deep. No panic. His body still obeyed. So he could think. He could plan. He could act. He got up, went to the window, pulled the curtain aside, and saw the city exactly as it always was, people on their way to work, cars stacked in traffic, cafe lights coming on, life moving forward without knowing or caring what was happening in one apartment, to one person. Each of them had a yesterday and a today, a memory and a reality and a world. They did not know that someone's today could be rewritten by a foreign decision, a foreign algorithm, a foreign will. That memory could become as fragile as glass, an identity as erasable as pencil. Alex reached toward the phone on the nightstand, then stopped. His hand froze in midair. His fingers did not touch the cold plastic. In this story, the phone was not a tool anymore. Not a connection. Not a window. It was a door. And a dangerous one, because anything could be waiting behind it, help, a trap, nothing at all. He could call Edward, try to reach the person who might become insurance. He could call the bank and demand answers, try to claw back control of his accounts. He could call compliance and try to negotiate, explain, persuade. But every call, every text, every digital touch was a signal. And signal, he understood now, was food for the circuit, fuel for a system that learned and adapted and built its version of reality, step by step, pushing his own reality out of the way. He opened the notebook beside the bed, paper, rough, real. On the first page, those 5 words were still there, written the night before like a spell, like a prayer, like the foundation of a new world, mentor. Sloan. Van Doren. Seal. Memory. Below them, in a firmer hand, more certain, he added one more word, the most important, the most fragile, the most human, people. Because his mentor, even dead, even ghost-like, had told the truth, what ca not be recalculated, what woe not fit in a spreadsheet, what woe not collapse into an algorithm, is not a device or a program or code. It's connection. Between people. Between past and present. Between memory and reality. He checked the door, slowly, carefully, the way someone checks a hazard. The lock was not damaged. The wood was not scratched. There were no clear signs of tampering, no dramatic evidence to show police, no detail to describe in a report. Only the sensation, quiet, persistent, physical, that the door had become more than a barrier between apartment and hallway. It was a border between 2 versions of the world. Outside, the city, familiar, ordinary, alive. Inside him, his memory, his fear, his resolve. He left. The landing was empty, no one there, no sound, only the cold ceiling light and dust spinning in a beam of sun from a grimy window. But in the air, faintly, hung a weak foreign scent of cologne, new, cool, almost clinical, as if someone had been there recently, had stood and waited, and had chosen to leave a signature in invisible ink. At the elevator, he ran into a neighbor, a man in a track jacket, about 40, someone Alex used to exchange a quick, formal morning with in passing. No eye contact. No pause. No reason to remember. Now the neighbor looked at him closely, sharply, like at a stranger, an intruder. Sorry, the man said with an awkward, almost apologetic smile that did not hide his confusion. His unease. Who are you here to see? Something clicked inside Alex, not loud, not painful. Clean. Like a gear engaging. A small, ordinary detail, but details like that are what keep reality real. They hold the world in place. The neighbor was not supposed to ask, * who are you here to see? * the neighbor was supposed to pass by, nod, grunt something, not notice him at all. That's how it had always been. That's how it was supposed to be now. I live here, Alex said softly, almost a whisper. And his voice sounded strange to him, wrong, like it belonged to someone trying to imitate him, copying his cadence and failing. The neighbor flushed, embarrassed, glanced toward Alex's door as if trying to recall who belonged there, who had the right to stand in this hallway, in this building, in this reality. Oh, yeah, he said uncertainly. His voice wobbled. It's just... He hesitated, searching for the right words. I've been here a long time, and I do not remember you. That was worse than user not found. Worse than account unavailable. Worse than any digital refusal, any system error. Because this was not a database. Not software. Not an algorithm. This was a human brain. Human memory. The self that was supposed to be continuous, whole, unbroken. And that brain, those memories, that self, had decided Alex was an extra line. A glitch. An anomaly that needed correction. Erasure. Forgetting. He nodded in silence, not as an answer, not as agreement, just a gesture, a motion to end the exchange, to shut down the absurdity, the slow torture, and stepped into the elevator. The doors closed slowly, smoothly, without a sound, cutting off not the neighbor's awkwardness, not Alex's confusion, but the first and worst proof that the circuit could touch more than documents, more than accounts, more than code. It could touch people. Their memory. Their reality. Outside, it was colder than he expected, or maybe the world had simply become less welcoming, less friendly, less his. The air felt sharp and needling, carrying gasoline and dust and other people's lives. He headed for the property management office, not to argue, not to demand, not to plead his case. He needed a test, simple and cruel, like an experiment, how deep the rewrite had already gone, how far the system had advanced in its effort to erase him, replace him, revise him. The woman at the front desk was polite, too polite, almost unnatural, as if that politeness had been taught and installed in her like software. Politeness had become a form of violence now, soft, invisible, and no less effective for it. You could not strike it. You could not yell at it. You could not even complain about it, because she was doing everything correctly, by the book, by protocol. She sounded as if this was all a small mix-up, an annoying misunderstanding, a technical error that could be fixed if you just followed the rules, if you were patient, if you trusted the system. Your name, she asked with a smile so even it might belong to a mannequin behind glass. Alex Severin, he said, and the name sounded foreign, as if he were naming not himself, but a character in a book, a figure in a movie that had never really existed. Her fingers moved over the keys, fast, confident, without hesitation. The monitor's glow reflected in her pupils, and for a second Alex saw lines and symbols flicker there, as though she was not looking at a screen at all, but into a mirror holding a different version of reality. We do not have a lease under that name, she said calmly. Her voice did not shift or wobble, it stayed perfectly level, perfectly polite. Is it possible you signed through another tenant? Alex braced a hand on the counter so he would not show how cold it had gotten inside, how the ground had dropped away, how the world had gone soft at the edges. There is a lease, he said, and the words came with effort, like pushing them through heavy fabric. I pay every month. I've lived there for 3 years. I do not doubt that, she replied, and there was not a drop of doubt in her tone, no irony, no edge. Just a clean, chilled fact. They're simply not listed in the system. Not listed. It landed like user not found, like account unavailable, like every refusal he'd heard over the last day, only now it was not a corporate window, not a banking prompt, not an app notification. It was the city. It was reality. It was life, refusing to recognize his right to exist. What if I show you a copy, he asked, already knowing the answer, already tasting it, bitter, metallic. I have a scan. Of course, she said, smiling wider, warmer, as if delighted by his hope, his naivete. Bring it in and we'll take a look. Alex understood without another word. If he brought it, the copy could become incorrect, non-compliant, wrong format, wrong date, wrong signature. If he showed it, it would be unacceptable, like his card, like his policy, like everything else. It was a conversation you could not win inside their frame, because the frame was flexible, shifting to suit their needs, their version of truth. They were not lying. They were selecting the reality that was convenient. The one that matched their algorithms, their procedures, their circuit. He left without arguing, without pushing, without trying to prove anything. On the outside, he was just a man caught in bureaucracy, stuck in paperwork confusion, suffering a clerical mistake. On the inside, he was watching a cage rise around him without the clang of bars, without the screech of metal, without an explicit threat. With quiet, nearly invisible motions. With soft words. With polite smiles. In his jacket pocket was the notebook, and in the notebook the scrap of grocery list he'd shoved in the night before, like a talisman, an anchor, proof of his humanity, his normal life, his belonging to a world that now felt distant and unreachable. He pulled it out, unfolded it, stared at the crooked, uneven words in his own handwriting from some time that used to be real, yesterday, the day before, back when yesterday and the day before meant something, when time ran in a straight line instead of looping like the transactions in his logs. Milk. Bread. Coffee. Stupid. Absurd. Nothing. And yet it was real. It existed on paper, in a reality you could touch and smell and see. For now. He walked into the nearest cafe, not because he wanted coffee, not because he was hungry, but because he needed a place to sit and think, to build a plan without drawing eyes. He ordered the simplest coffee, plain, and paid cash, worn bills that smelled like leather and dust and time. Cash was an ancient trust technology, primitive, but reliable. It did not ask who you were. It did not demand identity confirmation or check your transaction history. It asked only one thing, do you have it or not? If you did, you got what you wanted. Simple. Honest. Unnegotiated. The barista called the order number, a random string of digits, and Alex took the cup, feeling heat through the cardboard sleeve. He sat by the window where he could see the street, the people, the life that kept moving without knowing anything about his fear, his problem, his fight. Now people. People outside the procedure, outside the circuit, who might still be free, still real. He opened the notebook to the page where he'd written in big, clear letters, Edward equals insurance. Below it, smaller, Ingrid equals map. And below that, almost too faint to admit even to himself, Lyosha equals key. He did turn the phone on, just once. Not for a call, not for a conversation. One action, as short as a breath, as quick as lightning, send a message and vanish. Leave no trail. Sweep up behind himself. He found Edward's contact, the address he had managed to save overnight. It looked too public, too exposed for what he was about to write, for the secret he was about to hand over. But there was not another choice. There was not another path. He typed fast, without hello, without build-up, without wasted words, the way you write when there rests no time, when every sentence is expensive and any message could be your last, I have a funding chain and code artifacts. It looks like Templar seals. They are re-erasing me through procedure. If you want proof, I'll hand it over. Not over the network. Tell me where we can meet safely. He did not send it immediately. He reread it, cut the extra, left only what could not be dismissed as fantasy or paranoia, chain, artifacts, procedure. Then he added one final phrase, one hook, one password, one sign Edward Reed would not be able to ignore if he was who he claimed to be, Porpus Camillitones Christi. He sent it. Powered the phone off. Buried it deep in his pocket the way you hide a weapon, the way you hide a sin, the way you hide hope. For a moment, he felt a strange, almost painful relief, like some of the weight crushing his shoulders and chest had finally moved into someone else's hands, like he'd passed the torch he could no longer carry alone. But the relief did not last. It never could. Because there was a second person. A second anchor. A second thread. Ingrid Hart. Her name sat on one of the reports his mentor had saved separately, not in the general archive, not in a work folder, but in a personal, almost secret directory. A forensic audit, dry, emotionless language, columns of numbers, flow charts, and there, in a corner, a clean signature, Ingrid Hart. And one handwritten note in the margin, his mentor's handwriting, unmistakable, she sees nodes. Not words. Alex heard the mentor's voice again, rough, urgent, hold on to people. And he understood, if he wanted a map, if he wanted to understand where these threads and seals were leading, he needed someone who could read money not as payment, but as text. As story. As message. Someone who could see what lay underneath, in structure, in form. He powered the phone on again, just for a heartbeat, did what he had to do, and killed it. He found Ingrid in professional networks, in that world where profiles are masks and contacts are doors that may or may not open. Her photo showed a calm, almost ascetic face. A direct, attentive gaze. No smile, no performance. The look of someone who finds structure where others see chaos, who recognizes patterns where others see coincidence. Her messages were closed. Private. Protected, the kind of account a stranger could not just walk into. He could be written from his main address, the one tied to his name and his job and his life. But that account was already a ghost, a shadow, a database row that could vanish at any moment, be corrected, rewritten. So he did the only thing left, he used an older address, one that did not show up in corporate links, one that was not registered anywhere obvious, one that belonged not to Alex, but to Lyosha, the person he'd been once, in another life, before the circuit existed, before the system had reached for his past, his memory, his name. Not for nostalgia. Not romance. Because the past sometimes survives where the circuit has not been built, where the algorithms have not stretched yet, where the rules have not been written. Because sometimes the only thing that can save you in the future is what you left behind in the past. He wrote to her in a short, almost telegraphic style, no decoration, no explanation, just facts and the point. I found your report in my supervisor's archive. I need help. This is not about money. It says about how money becomes a seal. If you understand what I mean, reply with one word, circuit. He sent it. Powered the phone off again, as if every time he lit that tiny signal he gave the system another chance to see where to look, where to go, who to find. As if every digital touch left a trace, coordinates. He finished his coffee, cold, bitter, tasteless, and walked back out into a grey, damp day that promised nothing good but did not threaten him openly. People hurried past with their phones and tablets and thoughts, each locked in their own lives. And in that flow, Alex suddenly saw how easy it was to disappear. Not physically, he was still breathing, still walking, still looking at the world. But as a person. As a subject. As someone with a place in reality, a right to a name, a right to memory. All it took was a neighbor asking, "Who are you here to see?" All it took was an office saying, "Not listed." A handful of words. A handful of refusals. A few indifferent glances. And you stop existing. He walked without a visible destination, no obvious direction, no plan you could read from his posture. The destination was inside him, quiet and firm. A place where you could sit for a long time without being noticed, without breaking rules, the library. In a library nobody asks who you are, where you came from, where you were going. They ask only for quiet. They value only knowledge. And sometimes you can still find a corner where reality stays reality, not a version, not a patch. Where facts stay facts, not variables. He entered an old building that smelled of dust and paper and time, took a computer pass like any student, any researcher, any person who needed to look something up. He sat at a terminal that felt outdated and clunky and strangely safe, not shiny, not smart, just a machine that did what you told it and did not ask questions. He connected to the guest network, not through his phone, not through his laptop, not through devices that might already be compromised. Through public infrastructure. Through an open portal. A place where his name was not yet a row in a file, where his identity was not yet a variable in an equation. And he saw a new message. In the mailbox he used only for this, only for reaching people who might help, who might understand. From Ingrid. One word. No greeting. No signature. No explanation. Just a single word in lowercase, like a password, like a key, circuit, and below it, after a small pause, as if she debated whether to add anything else, an address. Not an office. Not a home. Not a restaurant. Not a place people meet to talk. A place convenient precisely because nobody remembered anyone, a self-service laundromat at an intersection, where the noise of machines blended with clinking coins and the dull roar of spinning drums, where people came for chores, not conversation, each absorbed in their own lives. And a time, no numerals, no precision, just, in an hour. Alex closed the screen, pulled the flash drive, cleared the browser history, stood up, and felt a small current run down his spine, from the base of his skull to his tailbone. Not fear. Not joy. Not relief. Something else. Something deeper. In a world that refused to confirm his existence, where every error and denial and indifferent look struck at his reality, a single word from a stranger, someone who could be ally or trap, felt like confirmation. You still here. You still exist. You still matter. He left the library and bought a cheap box of laundry detergent at a nearby kiosk, bright, loud packaging. Not because he needed to wash clothes, not because he had dirty laundry, but because in this story, even your alibi needed to be mundane. A man with detergent in a laundromat was normal. Part of the background. Not something anyone remembered. The laundromat greeted him with the smell of damp fabric, harsh soap, old metal, the smell of ordinary life, of routine. Everything here was simple and predictable, coins in slots, time on timers, drums turning in circles, again and again, like ritual, like prayer. The machines did one thing. Wash. Rinse. Spin. And in that monotony, something in him almost settled. Almost felt safe. Ingrid sat against the wall on a plastic chair that looked too flimsy for her posture, for her presence. She was not reading. She was not on her phone. She was not pretending to be busy. She was just sitting, as if she was not waiting for him so much as waiting for the moment she could leave, when the mission was done, the contact made. Her gaze slid to him as he walked in, quick, assessing, almost scanning, and paused on his hands, on his fingers, on the way he held the detergent box, the way he set it down, the way he moved, breathed, existed. "You come alone?" she asked. No hello. No smile. No small talk. Her voice was low, even, without emotion, the tone of someone reading instructions. Yes, Alex said, and his own voice sounded tight, unfamiliar, as if he were speaking not to a person but to an interface. Phone off. Yes. She nodded, short, almost invisible, as if checking a box on an unseen checklist. Not approval. Not praise. Just confirmation that he understood the rules, that he was not a total amateur who would ruin everything. Show me, Ingrid said, her gaze dropping to the notebook in his hands. But not everything. And not here. Alex pulled out his notebook and opened to the page where he'd decopied, by hand, the nodes and links and fund names, not the full graph, not the whole structure, just a slice, a fragment, a hint. Separately, on a loose sheet, he'd delisted a handful of names he'd managed to freeze in place before they started to smooth out, shifting and fading the way dreams do after you wake. He did not show her the graph. He did not show her the drawing. He did not show her the shape, the one that had been stalking him through code and sleep. He showed only dry lines. Facts. Data that should speak for itself, data meant for someone who could read not words, but nodes. Ingrid did not look right away. She took her time, slow and careful, like she was studying a map, a cipher, a message from somewhere else. Her face barely changed, no flinch, no grimace, no surprise, no fear. Only her eyes, deep down, sharpened with something like irritation. Annoyance. A flash of anger. Not at him. At what she was seeing. At what had just been confirmed. You understand this is not offshore accounts, right? She asked, quiet enough to be almost a whisper, but each word landed cleanly, unmistakable. I understand it essay form, Alex said, and his voice trembled with exhaustion and tension. But I do not understand why. Why build something this complicated, this beautiful, when you could just hide the money, bury the trail, vanish? Ingrid took a pencil, plain wood sharpened to a needlepoint, and drew directly over his notes. Thin, precise lines. Confident connections, as if the whole thing already existed in her head. They are not hiding the beneficiary, she said, even softer now, so Alex had to lean into the sound through the hum of machines and the noise of the street outside. They're rebuilding a route. This is not tax avoidance. It is not laundering. It is not enrichment. It's inheritance. Transfer. Preservation. Alex felt his engineer's mind snap into place, that familiar cold clarity that used to save him when things got hard. He wanted to ask why. How? Prove it. Explain it. Instead, he forced himself to listen. Just listen. Absorb. Understand. No interruptions. Have you ever seen old church floor plans? Ingrid asked suddenly, her gaze drifting past the laundromat walls as if she could see stone vaults, stained glass, an altar. The ones where aisles and columns and arches form geometry nobody explains with practical, convenient, functional. Because the point is not convenience. The point is symbol. Form. A message you can only read if you know the language, if you understand the code. She handed the page back. But it was not his page anymore, not a list of names, not a set of lines. Now it was a pattern. A map. A structure drawn into being by her pencil. And the pattern was familiar. Too familiar. It looks like a seal, Alex said, and his voice broke down into a rough whisper. It is a seal, Ingrid replied, and something flickered in her eyes, respect, recognition, a thin edge of approval. Just not a picture. Not a symbol shoved in your face. It's a rule of motion. An algorithm of transfer. A circuit where what flows is not energy, or information, or money. She leaned closer. Trust, she said. Power. Authority. Alex caught the scent of her perfume, restrained, almost clinical, without sweetness, without anything personal. The kind of scent worn by people who live in facts, numbers, documents, not feelings. They show it to people who can read it, Ingrid continued, lowering her voice to something intimate, as if the secret could not survive being spoken aloud. Because it's an invitation. And a test at the same time. An invitation for the ones ready to join, ready to accept the rules, ready to become part of the circuit. And a test for the ones who see too much, understand too much, get too close to the boundary. A test of what? Alex asked, the question slipping out before he could stop it. Ingrid looked at him like she was not measuring his intelligence or credentials, she was measuring whether he'd make it. "How fast you realize you do not exist in their version of the world," she said, and each word felt like it was being set into place, one after another, final and heavy. "And how fast you agree to become part of their version. Accept their rules. Play by their laws. Forget your past, your memory, yourself." Alex opened his mouth, to argue, to push back, to say he'd never agree, when the laundromat door chimed hard and sharp, loud enough to cut through the hum. Someone walked in. A regular-looking man, middle-aged, plain clothes, laundry basket in hand, face tired and neutral. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that should have pulled attention. But Ingrid stopped speaking instantly, as if someone had flipped a switch. Her eyes snapped to the entrance, then to the glass reflection of a washing machine, quick, focused, predatory. And Alex understood from the way her shoulders tightened, the way her fingers drew in, this was not just another customer. This was a watcher. Someone checking. Someone tracking. Someone controlling. Without moving her lips, Ingrid murmured so softly Alex almost read it more than heard it. "Do not look straight at him. And do not stand. Act like we do not know each other, like we are two strangers who happen to be in the same place at the same time." The air in Alex's chest tightened. The room felt heavier, as if it had lost a degree of oxygen and replaced it with silence. He fixed his gaze on the washing machine drum, the clothes tumbling, foam swirling behind glass, and the rhythm started to echo the knock from the night before, steady, methodical, without hurry. Like a system keeping time. Ingrid set her hand on his page, warm, dry, steady, and slid it back to him as if she was not returning paper so much as returning responsibility. Choice. The right to act. "Now we're redone," she said in a normal, everyday voice, loud enough for the laundromat, casual enough to sound like detergent and wash cycles and nothing else. "You tell Elle leave first. Slow. Calm. Do not look back. Like you'd just finished and heading home. And you?" Alex whispered, and his voice went raw, not fear for himself, but for her. Ingrid's smile was almost invisible. Just the slightest shift at the corners of her mouth, a tightening at the eyes. A look that carried a hint of irony, sadness, acceptance. The look of someone who knows what first really costs. "I'll leave differently," she said, quiet enough that only he could catch it. "I have my own roots. My own ways." She leaned closer, her breath warm at his ear. "And remember, if you open that graph on a live network again, if you try to send it through the internet, if you give the system a clean look at what you know, what you understand, they'll finish you. Not as an account. Not as an employee. Not as a line in a file. As a person. As memory. Do you understand?" Alex nodded, not because he truly understood, not because he agreed, but because he could not speak anymore. Could not breathe. Could not think. And in her eyes, no panic, no fear, just cold resolve, he understood something else for the first time. This was not just a system. Not just a circuit. There was a watcher. Someone above it. Someone who watched everyone, saw everything, knew more than they ever showed. And that watcher was already here. He walked into the laundromat. He was standing by the door. He was looking. He was waiting. Alex left first, exactly as Ingrid instructed, no sudden moves, no direct stare, no attempt to check who the man was or what happened behind him. He rose the way people rise when they simply done waiting for their laundry, tired of the hum, tired of the smell of detergent. He walked past the rows of machines without speeding up or slowing down, without turning around, just a person finishing an ordinary errand and returning to an ordinary life. Outside, he turned at the first corner into a busier stretch, more people, more noise, more chaotic movement where he could blend in, dissolve into the flow. Only after another block, when two intersections sat behind him and the laundromat's less glass doors were gone around the bend, did he let himself take a deeper breath. Not full, not free. Careful, like the air itself might be unsafe. His mind, trained by years of systems and algorithms, demanded a label. An explanation. A model. Asterisk security. Private investigator. Paranoia. Coincidence. Asterisk, but Ingrid had gone silent not from fear, not from confusion, she'd gone silent from experience. Cold experience paid for with years of dealing with people who erase the boundary between the possible and the real. Her eyes had told him a simple, harsh thing: if you explain too fast, you start making the wrong calls. And in this game, a wrong call did not cost your job, or money, or reputation. It cost your right to exist. To remember. To have a name. Alex kept walking without looking back, but his brain track turns automatically, like a navigator building an escape route. Left into a narrow street sprayed with graffiti. Right onto a wide avenue choked with cars and foot traffic. Across at the crosswalk where the signal blinked. Into a souvenir shop that smelled like plastic and sugar and dust, where tourists bought magnets and postcards, not realizing someone was passing through who was being edited out of reality. Out the back and into an alley lined with trash bins and the drip of water from an air conditioner above, steady, repetitive, like a metronome counting down to an ending he could not see. He paused at a mirrored storefront of a closed shop, dust and webbing tracing strange patterns across the glass, and studied his reflection, not as himself, but as a diagram. A way to catch shadows behind him. No one. Empty street. Just him, pale face, tired eyes, a question he could not swallow. But no one's meant nothing. Or it meant too much. In a game where the rules were not his, no one could simply mean he had not taken the step that made them appear yet. He pulled out the notebook, the real one, paper and grit, and reread what Ingrid had said, as if her words were more than explanation. As if they were a coded message he needed to decode to survive the next move. Not an escape scheme. A route. Inheritance. A rule of motion. Each phrase struck harder now, opening layers beneath layers. This was not about money, at least, not only about money. It was about something older and more structural, how power transfers not through law but through form, not through statements but through symbols, not through force but through trust, trust that could be rewritten like text, like code, like memory. He kept moving toward a place where he could think without running. A park swallowed him in the sound of leaves and the footfalls of runners moving along their own paths, chaotic, alive, easy to disappear inside. He sat on a bench under an old oak, set the detergent box beside him like a prop, and opened the page Ingrid had drawn on, simple, clean lines turning a list of funds into a map, a message. The simplicity was the most unsettling part. To see the pattern, you did not have to be a genius. You did not have to be a cryptographer. You just had to be willing to see. Which meant the people who built this, who braided seals into code, into documents, into reality, had expected someone like him to notice. Not a random person. Not an outsider. Not a victim. Someone who could read the message. Someone who was already part of the algorithm without realizing it. Alex took his pen and, beneath Ingrid's pencil lines, wrote one sentence, short as a verdict, deep as a drop, the order ISNT hiding. IT's building a form. He closed the notebook and felt his fingers twitch, not fear, not panic, but the shock of finally saying out loud what he'd known in his bones. And right then, as if in response, his phone vibrated in his pocket, short, insistent, like a knock at a door. A ridiculous thought flashed hot and sharp, asterisk, they can turn it on themselves. They can wake it remotely. They can pull the strings. Asterisk, his mind tried to protect him with something rational, asterisk, no. You did not shut it all the way down. The battery held. A network ping. Asterisk, but rationality was not shelter anymore. It was a trap, built from old rules that no longer applied. He took out the phone. Cold plastic against his palm. The screen stayed black, lifeless, except for a small missed call indicator. Unknown number. And beneath it, a notification, a new email that had arrived while the phone was off, while he believed he was out of reach, out of the circuit. He did not want to open it. Any message could be a hook. A lure. A way to locate him, read him, predict the next move. But Ingrid's words returned, *hold on to people. People were not procedures. They were not algorithms. People could lie and manipulate, sure, but people could also help. Protect. Believe. And if this was Edward, it was not an attack. It was insurance. He brought the phone fully awake just long enough to read the first line that surfaced on the dark background, from Edward Reed subject, too clean. Something inside Alex went tight like a wire under load. Edward was already in it. He recognized the style, felt the pattern, sensed that cleanliness that was not order at all, it was design. He opened the message. No greeting. No warm-up. No extra words, like Edward was not writing an email so much as issuing a set of instructions. I got your signal. Do not write from that address again. If this is not a prank, you do not have much time. We shall meet where cameras love tourists. They do not like noise or witnesses. Place, the lobby of a public museum, the hall with the temporary exhibition. Time, today, closer to closing. Bring only what not change afterward. And remember, if you already being erased, any attempt to prove it becomes their excuse to finish the process. At the bottom, after a pause of space, there was a final line, less formal, more like the voice Alex knew from the channel, dry, edged with humor, and deadly serious underneath. And yeah. Paupers Camillatones Christie is not a joke. It smells like old history. Alex shut the phone off without replying, without thinking, almost on reflex, and buried it deep in the inner pocket of his jacket, the way you hide something volatile, something that could go wrong at the worst possible moment. The way you hide a piece of proof that could become either a lifeline or a sentence. A museum. The word echoed in his head with a dull, uneasy weight, like a bell struck in an empty cathedral. In their world, the Order's world, the System's world, the circuit, a museum was not just a place where old things sat behind glass and school groups drifted past placards. It was a node. A crossing point. A place where the past lay neatly catalogued, explained, made harmless, while the present pretended it was all history, culture, inheritance with no teeth. And the logic was brutal in its elegance. If the Order could build forms through money, through paperwork, through code, then a museum was the perfect place to show those forms to the people trained to see them. The ones who spoke the language. The ones who could read the same tradition, the same long chain of inheritance. An open secret. A message in plain sight, understandable only if you carried the key. Alex stood up from the bench, feeling fatigue settle onto his shoulders, feeling the cold seep through his jacket. The world around him was hostile and unfamiliar, and at the same time, infuriatingly fascinating. Like a hard problem. Like a system begging to be reverse-engineered. Now he had a goal that looked natural, normal, safe, a museum, a temporary exhibition, a crowd. Anyone could go, students, researchers, bored passers-by. Which meant he could, too, without raising alarms. On the way, he ducked into a discount clothing store where shirts and coats hung like pale ghosts of other people's lives and bought a baseball cap, plain, dark, no logos. Not because he thought a cap made him invisible. Because he wanted to change himself just enough, by a sliver, for someone hunting him to see something slightly off. For any kind of pattern recognition, human or otherwise, to hesitate. To misfire. He bought one more thing, a small notebook with a cheerful tourist print, almost childish, little sketches of landmarks and bright slogans. He slid a few pages of copied nodes and fund names into it, along with the lines he managed to pin down before they started smoothing and shifting. 2 copies. 2 worlds. 2 anchors. One was real, paper, rough, smelling faintly of ink and fear. The other was camouflage, bright, unserious, the kind of notebook a tourist might carry while jotting down impressions, harmless and forgettable. He kept thinking about Ingrid, her voice, her eyes, the exhaustion in her that was not physical so much as existential, the kind you see in people who have stared into the same abyss for too long and stopped expecting it to blink first. "Ein LL leave differently," she said. There was no bravado in it. No performance. Just calculation, cold, precise. Differently meant she had routes, paths, exits other people did not see, routes that did not show up on maps or in systems. Differently meant she'd already been inside structures like this before. She knew how they moved. How they thought. How they hunted. A sharp flare of anger hit him, at himself, not at the system, not at the order, not at whoever was closing in. He'd attached too fast to a person he'd known for barely 20 minutes. Someone who could be anything, ally, trap, bait, tool. He'd let himself hope. Let himself feel connection. The anger was useless. A shout into a vacuum. He could not afford the luxury of isolation. Alone, they'd erase him cleanly, quietly, like deleting a line from a database. People disappear one at a time. A crowd is inconvenient. Loud. Expensive. So he had to stay in the crowd. He had to find allies. Even if it was risk. Even if it was a trap. He reached the museum about an hour early and did not go in right away. He circled the building, slow and careful, studying it the way you'd study a secured site rather than a cultural institution. Cameras, every corner, every overhang, dark lenses aimed down like patient eyes. Entrances and exits, the grand front doors for visitors, the service doors for staff, deliveries, the people who came to work rather than look. Uniformed security at the threshold, checking tablets, speaking into radios, trying to look bored. Their eyes were not bored. Their eyes were trained. The crowd, tourists with backpacks and cameras, families with kids, couples, students, people alone. Laughing, talking, moving, making the kind of living noise you could disappear into. And then the thing he did not want to see, but saw anyway, because his attention had been sharpened by days of fear and watching and being watched. A man with glasses. Not the same one from outside his building the night before, or maybe the same, and Alex simply could not be sure anymore. His memory had started to float, details blurred, blended, swapped places. The posture was similar. The calm, functional clothes. The way he existed without asking to be noticed. Or maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was his fear projecting itself onto a stranger. The readiness to find an enemy everywhere. The man stood by an ice cream kiosk, looking at his phone, face relaxed, like someone waiting, killing time. Nothing suspicious. Nothing threatening. And that ordinary normalcy was exactly what made it feel wrong. Alex walked past without changing his pace, without looking directly, but catching details at the edge of his vision. He kept his heartbeat even, forced it into the steady rhythm of someone with nowhere urgent to be. If he showed fear, if he flinched, if he slipped, he'd turn himself into a signal. And signals, in this game, were a beacon. Inside, the museum air was dry and cool, manufactured, like a lab or an archive, like a place where time had been paused. It smelled of stone and polished metal, a faint trace of old paper, and something else he could not name, thin as a whisper. Not an odor so much as an impression, the scent of authority. The breath of a secret that lay under glass but still lived. He bought his ticket with cash, worn bills that carried other people's hands, other people's lives. It mattered. He did not want a digital mark tying him to this place, this time, this choice. He'd come here trying to outrun digital erasure, the last thing he needed was to hand the system a neat line of data to erase. The temporary exhibition was modern, almost sterile, glass cases, neon accents, interactive panels inviting visitors to touch history, see the past through the present, become part of the narrative. Alex watched it with a dry, almost painful irony. The history that had found him did not need sensors or screens. It reached him through code and documents, through compliance pop-ups and knocks at the door and voices on the phone. It was alive. Dangerous. Real. Not preserved. Not safe. Not dead. He entered the temporary hall, spacious, high-ceilinged, with installations suspended overhead and a soft wash of light that made the room feel slightly detached from the world. He sat on a bench along the wall where he could see the entrance and watch the flow of people without looking like he was watching. Time stretched, thick and slow. Visitors drifted in, snapped photos, posed, moved on, frames in an endless film. Couples argued about meaning. Kids tugged parents toward the exit. A guide spoke in an even, practiced tone about context and symbolism, about a past turned into a product. Alex did not listen to the guide. He listened to the room. The pauses between voices. The footsteps on stone. The faint wheeze of ventilation, like something enormous breathing in its sleep. He listened for the moments when attention thinned and sound fell away, when you could hear what you were not supposed to hear, your own heartbeat, the whisper of fabric, the invisible ticking of time. Closer to closing, when the light outside the windows went slate-colored and the hall had thinned to only a few visitors, Edward appeared. Alex recognized him immediately, not by the face he'd seen on screens and photos, but by the way he held himself. The way his gaze chose angles. The way he carried an aura of constant framing, constant analysis, a camera behind the eyes, a mind that hooked details and built them into a story. Edward did not approach directly. He walked past first, as if by chance, paused at a case, looked at an exhibit, then drifted back and stopped near the bench where Alex sat. Without looking straight at him, like he was talking to himself, he said softly, "Too clean, right?" Alex nodded, small, almost invisible, barely moving his head. He wanted to pour everything out, the loop in the logs, the seals, his mentor's voice, Ingrid, the last day and night of pressure building in his chest. But he understood, instinctively, that Edward did not want a lot. He did not want emotion. He did not want long explanations. He wanted nodes. Facts. Links. Something you could build a narrative on, something that would not collapse under a simple denial. "I have paper," Alex said, just as quietly. His voice came out rough, tired, but steady. Edward finally looked at him, not head-on, more like a sideways assessment. His eyes were sharp and worn at the same time, like someone who had watched reality break too often from human greed and fear, and too rarely from something higher, colder, more incomprehensible. "Paper is good," Edward said. No praise, no sarcasm. Just fact. Paper does not update overnight. It does not sync to the cloud. It does not get edited from a distance. He let that hang for a beat. As long as it stays in your hands. Alex hesitated, searching for words that could hold the scale of it. They ask questions about memory. About what I remember. About what did not happen. Or what happened, but is not there anymore. Edward's eyebrow lifted slightly, not surprise, interest. The look of someone watching a new pattern reveal itself. "Then it is not about money anymore," he said, voice dropping even lower, the way people speak when they do not want walls to learn the shape of a sentence. "Money is the curtain. The tool. Memory is what matters. Memory is power. Whoever controls the past controls what comes next. Whoever can rewrite what you remember can rewrite the world, anew with it." Alex pulled out the tourist notebook, bright, unserious, and offered a single page carefully. Not the whole thing. Not the full truth. A fragment. A hook. Edward took it without looking like it mattered and read fast, almost too fast, but Alex saw his eyes snag on names, on links, on the pattern that now existed not only in code but on paper. Edward's face did not show surprise. It showed the same thing Ingrid had shown, irritation at a coincidence that was too exact, too elegant to be an accident. The anger of someone who hates realizing he is not discovering truth so much as walking into a script. "This is not just offshore plumbing," Edward said, handing the page back. His fingers brushed Alex's, cold, dry, brief, like a passing shadow. "It's a root. A transfer chain. An inheritance algorithm. I've seen something like it. Different place. Different time. Same idea. I've been told that, Alex said, and his voice wavered, tension, exhaustion, a thin thread of hope. Someone else. Someone who understands it better than I do. Who? Edward's attention sharpened, less curiosity than calibration. Alex hesitated for a fraction of a second. Saying Ingrid's name would pull her into light, into story, into danger, maybe against her will. Not saying it might cost him Edward's trust, and Edward was the only bridge he had left between this nightmare and something the world might believe. Ingrid Hart, Alex said at last, quiet and clear, like a password offered in the dark. She sees nodes. Not words. Edward nodded once, almost imperceptibly, like he was filing the name into a private index. No surprise. No follow-up. As if he'd expected it. As if she'd always been one of the points on this map. Then they are already walking you down a corridor, Edward said, voice turning even softer, almost confessional. And you think you'd running. You think you'd choosing. You think you in control. But too clean is not just their style. It's less the style of a game where the rules were not written by you. The field was not marked by you. The pieces move along paths that exist before you see them. He paused. And you one of the pieces. Even if you fight it. The words hit exactly where Alex's worst doubt lived, not in whether the threat was real, not in whether the circuit existed, but in whether his choices were still his. I do not understand who they are, Alex said, voice scraping raw, almost desperate. I see traces. Seals. Patterns. But I do not see faces. Names. Reasons. Just procedures. Systems. Just the circuit. Edward's mouth twitched in a humorless half-smile, the kind that was not comfort so much as armor. Nobody understands until it's late, he said, bitterness flat as dust. They are not just people. Not only. It's tradition. Structure. A way power survives across centuries, changing skins, keeping the same bones. His gaze held. But you have something most people do not. You saw the sealing code. Not in architecture. Not in a document. In code, the foundation of the modern world, the one place that's less supposed to stay clean and logical. He paused again, letting the implication settle. So you not a random witness. Not just a victim. Not a glitch. You a node. Part of the scheme. Maybe a key part. Maybe the part nothing works without. He stepped a little closer, not threatening, but deliberate, like someone offering a route through a minefield. Their conversation was masked by the ventilation hum, the soft echo of the hall, the distant voices of the last visitors drifting toward the exit. Now listen carefully, Edward said, his voice tightening into focus. I have a place. Not my home, with this probably already being watched. Not an office, too many digital traces. A place where you can talk without leaving a clean trail. He held Alex's gaze. But before we go there, before we make plans, gather proof, try to understand what is happening, I want you to do one thing. Not for me. For you. What? Alex asked. The word came out shaky, more tension than sound. Edward glanced at the display case beside them, not at the artifact under glass, old and silent, but at the glass itself. The cold, transparent barrier that made history safe to observe, but not alive. The point was not what lay inside. The point was the boundary, an illusion of safety. I want you, right now, here in this hall, to say one sentence out loud, Edward said, voice almost a whisper now, steady, deliberate, like a ritual. Not for me. Not for cameras. Not for a story. He leaned in just enough for Alex to hear him clearly. For yourself. For who you are. for who you were before any of this started. Alex's whole body tightened. His mind searched for the trap, the hidden angle, the catch. But the request sounded too simple, almost childish, and that made it worse. "Which sentence?" he asked. His throat felt squeezed, like the word had to fight its way out. Edward looked straight at him, and there was no mockery there. No condescension. Just a solemn seriousness, as if he knew the price of the ritual he was about to ask Alex to perform. Alex felt something inside him tear, not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, like a thin thread that's been pulled too long and too confidently. "She pulled me out," he repeated, stubborn, almost childlike. "If it were not for her, I would not have made it here." Edward did not argue. He did not argue the way people argue, with heat, with a need to win, to prove, to pin someone to a wall. He argued differently, he added context, and the context changed the meaning on its own. "I am not saying she's an enemy," he said evenly. "And I am not saying she's a friend. Those are the labels the system loves most, black and white. Easy to classify. Easy to predict." He tapped the folder, the paper, the past. "I am saying she knows how to move through these corridors. And anyone who knows how to move through corridors is almost never just walking. They know where the cameras are, where the blind spots are, where there are doors without locks and locks without doors. They know where you read not seen. And why." Alex swallowed. His throat was dry, as if he had de-swallowed sand instead of air. In his head, like a badly written script, two competing versions of reality ran side by side, and both sounded plausible. That was their strength, plausibility never has to be truth. "Then what am I supposed to do?" he asked, and it did not sound like a plea so much as a hand reaching for a railing in the dark. "I've already done everything I can. I am holding on to paper. I am not opening the graph online. I am not answering calls." Edward raised a hand, cutting him off gently but decisively. "You did the main thing," he said. "You stopped explaining yourself to them. That's rare. Most people break at the first update your policy. The first verify your identity. They start proving, justifying, writing emails, calling support lines, arguing with invisible people who stopped making decisions a long time ago." He leaned forward, and the lamp-flesh shadow made his face sharper, almost angular. "But next you'll have to do what no system likes." "What?" "Split," Edward said simply. "Not in the sense of losing your mind. In the sense of no longer being a single point of failure. Right now you are one line. One record. One object that can be deleted. We need to turn you into a plurality. A paper plurality. A human plurality." Alex stared at him, not quite understanding, and it felt humiliating, not to his pride, to his survival. He was used to a world that yielded if you understood its logic. Here the logic existed, but it belonged to someone else. Edward, as if reading him, exhaled and picked up a plain, cheap notebook from the table, like the tourist one, only without the pictures. "First, anchors," he said. "You already said, I exist. Now all the name." Alex went rigid, as if the word name was not a word but a button you were afraid to press. He started. "Not what less on your passport," Edward cut in. "Not what the banks know. Not what forms love. The one that sounded when someone called you home. The one that belongs to you without paperwork." Alex fell silent. In the workshop, everything suddenly became audible, the distant hum of the street, a faint click somewhere inside a wall, the barely there creak of the old building as if it were breathing. Edward slid a sheet of paper in front of him. "Write it," he said. "In your own hand. Not for me. For you. And keep it separate." Alex took the pen. His fingers trembled slightly, not from weakness, but from that feeling you get when you realize you're about to take a step that will not change the situation so much as it will change ***. And once it changes you, it changes the situation too. He wrote for letters on the paper, not in quotes, not as a nickname, but as a name that suddenly weighed more than any signature on any contract. Lyosha. He finished and sucked in a sharp breath, like he had not been breathing until now. Edward did not smile. He did not say I knew it. He did nothing that could turn the moment into a pretty scene for a camera. He just nodded, slowly, almost respectfully. Good, he said. Now listen carefully. There is something worse than you do not exist in the system. What could be worse? Alex asked, and in his voice was the weariness of someone who had already been shown the bottom, only to be offered something lower. Edward looked at the paper with the name, as if it were not a sheet but an instrument that measured danger. When the system starts substituting your reasons, he said. Not facts. Not documents. Reasons. Why you do what you do. Why you go where you go. Why you trust one person and not another. Because if it rewrites your reasons, you tell L start believing your choice is yours star. And then you tell L walk yourself exactly where they need you, and no pursuit, no voice, no regime. Clean. Beautiful. Cold spread through Alex's stomach, not fear, understanding. It felt like that moment in debugging when you realize the bug is not that the function crashes. The bug is that the function works, just not the way you think. So how do I tell? He hesitated. Which reasons are mine, and which are theirs? Edward pulled a thin binder from the folder and placed another sheet beside the paper with the name. It held only a few bullet points in Edward's handwriting, fast, angular, without flourish. Tests, he said. Not one. Several. The system loves breaking you on a single test. We're going to hold you up on multiple ones. He tapped the first item. First, the body. Food, water, sleep. Not romance, biology. When you're hungry and depleted, you agree to safety faster. Second, paper. Always. Any important thought goes to paper first. Third, witnesses. People who see you alive, talk to you, remember you. We're going to build those points. Small ones. But many. Alex listened like someone being handed assembly instructions for his own identity. And the fourth, he asked, noticing the blank line at the bottom. Edward looked at him as if deciding whether this could be said now. The fourth you'll supply yourself, he said. Something they ca not steal, rewrite, or edit. Not a name. Not a document. Something deeper. Alex opened his mouth to ask what, but at that moment, somewhere below, past the workshop door, there was a sound. Not a knock. Not footsteps. A soft, dry click, like someone had entered a code on a panel and the front door had decided, yes. Edward froze instantly. People freeze like that when their nervous system is trained on threat the way other people are trained on music. He got up and moved to the window without a sound. Pulled the curtain aside by a millimeter, just enough to see the street without being seen. Alex stayed seated, unmoving, gripping the sheet with the name as if it were a passport in a world where passports no longer worked. Edward watched for a long moment. Then he returned to the table and, very calmly, too calmly, took a small plastic bag from a drawer and tossed it to Alex. Put it on, he said. Inside were plain, non-prescription glasses and a medical mask, cheap, worn, the kind that turns a face into background. What is happening? Alex whispered. Edward did not answer right away. He took a marker and quickly wrote 2 lines on the back of the test sheet, again without explanation, like someone conserving words not for style, but from experience. Don't leave right away. Leave after the noise. Is this one of yours? Alex asked, and his own phrasing made him sick. One of yours sounded like he'd already accepted there were yours and not yours, like he'd already been assigned to a side. Edward leaned closer, his voice nearly invisible. I do not know, he said honestly. And that's a good sign. Because if I did know, it would mean I was allowed to know. And when you'd allowed to know, you'd already being led. From downstairs came another sound, clearer now, measured footsteps on the stairs. Calm. Unhurried. The steps of someone who was not afraid of being late. Alex felt his brain try to auto-build a model. Security? Police? A random tenant? But Edward, as if guessing, shook his head. Do not model it, he whispered. Watch the style. Too clean is a style. And style has a scent. The footsteps climbed another flight. Then, pause. And a short, delicate knock on the workshop door. Not a hit. Not a demand. A polite signal you could easily mistake for an error. Edward looked at Alex, and his eyes said only one thing, do not breathe loud. The knock came again, same cadence, same reasonable restraint. And then a voice. Calm, level, almost caring, the voice of people who speak in the name of order. Edward read. Open up. This is for your safety. Alex felt his heart try to break into a run, but he held it, like holding an animal on a leash when it's straining toward a trap. Edward slowly raised a hand, not hush but now star. He took the paper with the name, folded it in half, then again, turning it into a tiny square, and pressed it into Alex's palm, closing Alex's fingers around it so hard it hurt. Do not give that up, he whispered. Under any conditions. Even if they ask you to confirm. Especially if they ask you to confirm. The knock grew slightly more insistent. Still polite. Still reasonable. Edward read, the voice repeated, and there was no anger in it, only procedure. We can resolve this calmly. Edward's eyes went to the table, folders, printouts, black marker notes, the traces of his own war against forgetting. Then back to Alex, and in that look was something Alex had not seen before, not confidence, not control, but readiness. Readiness to lose the workshop, lose the archive, lose comfort, without losing meaning. Edward took a small metal box off a shelf, something Alex had not noticed before. Opened it. Inside were several thin cards of thick paper, no logos, no addresses, only symbols, simple lines, nodes, connections. Almost a diagram, almost a seal, but so minimal Alex's mind refused to name it at first. Edward handed one card to Alex. If we split, he whispered, and you forget everything except one thing, forget everything except this form. They'll take you to a place where you can still be assembled again. Alex wanted to ask where how why but the boards under the door creaked again, as if someone had shifted their weight to stand more comfortably, closer, to show, time is short. Edward crossed to the back of the workshop and shoved aside a tall cabinet that looked immovable, but moved more easily than it should have. Behind it was a narrow door, almost invisible, painted to match the wall. Here, Edward mouthed. Alex stood, and at that moment the phone in his inner pocket, powered off, dead, cut off from the world, buzzed again, short and steady, like someone else's heartbeat. He did not take it out. Did not even twitch. He just squeezed the tiny square of paper with the name harder, an anchor, a contract, a proof. And silently stepped into the dark slit behind the cabinet, into a space with no cameras, no vitrines, no safety, where, if Edward was right, walls were still walls at least some of the time. Behind the workshop door, the calm voice still sounded like help. This is for your safety. And for the first time, Alex understood clearly, the most dangerous thing in this game was not threats. It was offers. Alex wanted to shout, to reject it, to find the crack in the logic. But there was no crack. There was only the style, too clean flawless. And that style had already reached into his memory, into his past. In this game, doubt was not weakness. It was the only verification tool he had left. IV had a similar case, Edward went on, looking past Alex, somewhere into the past. A man came in off the street with an artifact. He was sure he was running from the web. But the web had already built him a corridor, one that ended with me waiting. Not as an enemy. As a function. It's less convenient to route certain narratives through me. To launch legends. A dry, metallic taste rose in Alex's mouth. You think I am a legend? I think you'd re a pretext, Edward corrected. And that's usually much worse. He turned to an old laptop, its case scratched up and plastered with stickers. The desktop was bare, no clutter, just folders with faceless names. I am going to show you something, he said. But first, one more practical question. His gaze sharpened again, direct and piercing. Name one action you took yesterday, one you re 100% sure of. Not as a memory. As a fact. A trace. Asterisk yesterday. Asterisk the word lost its hardness, turned unstable, like silt near the shoreline. Alex sifted through fragments, the list on the fridge, notes in his notebook, the strangely shortened messages. Any of it could be disputed, forged, erased. Paper, he forced out at last. I wrote in my notebook. Ink. That can be checked. Good. Edward nodded, and the approval was not for the fact, it was for the method. Because now you're going to see something that will make you doubt everything else. He opened a video file. The image froze on a surveillance camera frame. Angle, date, time, everything was blacked out with thick rectangles, as if Edward had cut every unnecessary variable from the evidence, anything that might lead somewhere else. The frame showed the street near the museum. A crowd. The glass of a souvenir shop window. Alex saw himself. His baseball cap. His careful gait. The pause at the window, his attempt to blend into the background, which became a mark in itself. Then the man in the coat entered the frame, the same shadow that had followed him from the beginning, or just one of many, Alex could not tell anymore. The shadow drew close from behind and said something the camera could not hear. Alex's digital double did not turn. He only quickened his pace, exactly as he had in real life. And then she appeared. Ingrid. She really did step out of the crowd. Walked past. Said something without moving her lips much, just as he remembered. And then came the part he had not seen. Ingrid did not dissolve into the dark. She took a few precise steps toward the man in the coat. And he did not make a single aggressive move. Did not grab her, did not block her path. He only turned his head slightly, like a colleague recognizing a colleague in a noisy corridor. And Ingrid nodded. A small nod. Almost nothing. A nod you could read any way you wanted, asterisk I gem here. Asterisk asterisk it is on track. Asterisk asterisk acknowledged. Asterisk but in that nod, in that micro-expression caught by a soulless lens, there was none of the fear, none of the desperate resolve Alex had felt from her in the laundromat. There was a cold, almost bureaucratic clarity. Then Ingrid took a phone from her pocket and, for a second, showed the screen to the man in the coat, like presenting a digital pass. He nodded again. Edward killed the video. Silence snapped into the room, sharp and heavy. Where did you get that? Alex asked, and his voice came out flat, almost without timbre, like synthesized speech. That's bad news number 2, Edward said without looking at the screen. I have a source. Inside the city surveillance system. He thinks he's less helping me dig for the truth. And I am no longer sure whose truth he's less digging for. Alex clenched his fingers around the notebook until his knuckles went white. The paper crackled in protest. So she could. She could have been anything, Edward cut in, and for the first time his voice held not cold clarity but tired irritation. That's why we're not building a theory off one frame. We'd hell build it on 2 things, material traces and motives. Everything else is noise. He jabbed a finger at the sheet of nodes on the table, the one Alex had brought from the museum. She told you not to open the graph online. That's smart advice. It protects you. But it has a reverse side. It keeps you isolated, in the dark, while they spotlight the parts of the picture that benefit them. A short, furious flare ignited in Alex's mind, anger not at Edward, not at Ingrid, but at himself, at this world where every rational move had a second bottom, where *2 clean* was not a compliment but a sentence. Then why, he burst out, his voice cracking. Why would she pull me out? Edward held his gaze for a long moment, the look of someone who had finally heard a question outside the radius of fear. Because you may be more useful to them alive, Alex, he said softly, almost a whisper. You'd a carrier. The word hung in the air, immense and heavy. A carrier, of what? Alex could hear his own heartbeat thudding in his temples. Edward tapped a knuckle against the folder with the Latin motto. Of what you call the Philosopher stone. You think it's a file, a program, an algorithm. I think it's a procedure. A ritual that needs a living operator to complete it. Someone who believes in code more than in people. Someone who sees flawless logic as the highest beauty. No, Alex wanted to shout. Laugh. Refute. But his memory, unreliable, treacherous, handed him shards, check what you remember. Impossible timestamps. Messages shrinking. Sloane's questions about last night. This was not an attack on data. It was calibration. Preparing the carrier. You re-saying his voice broke. I am saying the launch may have started the moment you first saw the loop in the logs, Edward said, quiet but precise. And you not the victim of a hack. You a critical component in the scheme. The silence thickened until it felt physical, like cotton. Alex looked down at his hands, at fingers that had run over keyboards for decades, writing clean, elegant solutions. At his nails, where grey dust had settled, the trace of touching paper, reality outside the screen. What do I do? He asked, and it was no longer a cry of despair. It was a request for instructions. The next step in the algorithm of survival. Edward did not answer immediately. He stood, crossed to the cluttered table against the wall, rummaged in a drawer, and pulled out a small object, a flash drive in an old, almost archaic casing. A strip of paper was stuck to it with a single word written on it, threshold I'll do what I once had to do, he said, coming back and setting the flash drive on the table between them. I'll find the boundary. A place where their procedure, their circuit, loses strength, where the rules have not been written yet. And I'll make the decision there, not here, in this room, under the gaze of cameras that may not exist, or may be more numerous than we think. Where is that boundary? Edward lowered his eyes to the folder, to the name Demolary, and said the next word so softly it felt like a mine, Boston. Something inside Alex tightened into a cold, hard knot. Not a museum. Not again, no museum with its glass coffins and controlled gaze. Why Boston? His voice stayed level, but a hair-thin steel wire trembled inside it. Because that's where I first saw that the past is not a book you can close, Edward said slowly, separating the words as if they were heavy. It's this infrastructure. There's a museum there, the facade. And there's what under it. A node. A place where their form crystallizes. Where the circuit becomes visible. Alex did not speak. He understood the logic. Museums were their temples, places where history lay under glass, safe, explained, dead. The perfect metaphor for their power. You can look, but you see not touch. You can know, but you see not act. Edward slid the flash drive toward him. Everything I have on Boston is on here. Maps, names, hypotheses. But you will not open it on your own hardware. Not on anything that's ever touched their networks. Then on what? Alex asked, already knowing the answer. Edward nodded at his old laptop. Here. Now. And only after you are ready to hear bad news number 3. Alex's jaw clenched with a spasm. He nodded once, short, granting permission for the blow. Edward exhaled. In his eyes flickered a shadow of something that could have been sympathy or just fatigue from repeating the same pattern. Your mentor. Mark. He may not have been a victim. And not a traitor. He may have been part of the mechanism. Part of the order. Part of the wrong ones he warned you about. Do you understand what that means? Alex froze. A storm rose inside him, human, warm, furious resistance. Mark had saved him. Mark had left a warning. Mark had called him Lyosha. But Edward did not push. He simply let the question hang in the air, cold and sharp as a razor. A test of whether Alex could think beyond emotion. And at that exact moment, when the silence became unbearable, the phone, buried deep in the layers of fabric and fear inside Alex's jacket pocket, vibrated. Not a call. A short, insistent sequence of pulses. A message. Alex did not even move. He stared at Edward. Edward stared back. The vibration came again, steady, methodical, without panic. Like knocking on a door. Like the rhythm of a procedure. Yours? Edward asked, brief. No surprise, no alarm. Just notation. Without breaking eye contact, Alex slowly, like a slow-motion shot, pulled the phone out. The black plastic was cold as ice. The screen lit up by itself, without his touch, washing his face in a bluish, ghost light. A message. No number. No name. A blank sender line. First line, one word that drained the blood from his face. Asterisk asterisk Lyosha. Asterisk asterisk and below it, a second act, one sentence that cinched everything into a tight, monstrous knot, do not trust the one who shows you someone else's eyes. The threshold is closer than he says. Alex lifted his head, very slowly. His gaze met Edward's S. Edward was watching him. Calm. Too calm. The way people look when they are either perfectly clean, or so deep inside the game they become part of it. The air in the room suddenly turned dense, heavy, unbreathable. Pressure built, squeezing Alex's temples. And in that instant, with icy, absolute clarity, Alex finally understood, in this new reality, in this circuit he was only learning to see, there were no safe places. There were only spaces with different configurations of threat. And every choice he made boiled down not to running asterisk from asterisk, but moving asterisk, to the next node, the next clue, the next edge of truth, which might be just another mirror, like everything else. It took him a moment to understand what was most terrifying about the message. Not the word asterisk Lyosha asterisk, that had already become a blade they could draw at any time to test him, his resilience, his memory, his belonging. Not the warning about the video. Warnings were multiplying like branches of a graph, each offering its own version of reality. The worst part was the synchronization. Someone knew he was sitting right here, in this room, watching that very recording. Someone chose the perfect moment to strike, the peak of doubt, the point of maximum vulnerability. He shifted his gaze to Edward. Edward did not flinch. Did not reach for the phone. Did not ask, asterisk, what does it say? Asterisk, he just sat there, watching Alex as if he was not waiting for a reaction to the text, but to the very fact of the signal, watching how a person breaks under the pressure of total visibility. That's less beautiful, Edward said calmly, with almost professional approval. Very beautiful. What less beautiful? Alex's voice came out drier than he meant it to, stripped of tone, like a synthesizer. Edward nodded toward the phone on the table, lying there like evidence. Manipulating time and trust, he said. They making sure you stop trusting the one channel that's still speaking to you directly. The one that is not hiding behind procedure. Alex felt a wave of irritation surge in his chest, sharp, human, unpolished. And then, like a cold shower, came the realization, the emotion might not even be his. In this reality, emotions arrived like background updates, sudden, smooth, asterisk for user safety. Asterisk, he turned the phone face down, cutting the bluish light from his eyes. The plastic felt cold and slick. He repeated, tapping the word like code. You keep saying asterisk they star. Because it's less convenient, Edward said, with a faint, tired irony. As long as we say asterisk they asterisk, we do not say names. And names are keys. Coordinates. Vulnerabilities. Alex did not answer. He stared at the wood grain of the table, the peeling edges of cardboard folders, the old flash drive labeled asterisk asterisk threshold asterisk asterisk. The room was stuffy from the lamp-twists trapped warmth and their breath, but a cold crawl moved along his spine, not fear, understanding. Every surface in here could be an interface, every silence a protocol. Let's treat this like a problem, he said at last, forcing his voice steady. Like an engineering problem. Facts. Edward lifted an eyebrow, something like respect flickered in his eyes. He agreed. I like problems where you lose the moment you start thinking you are smart. Alex nodded, and the nod was not a plea now, but confirmation, yes. Do not be sure. Doubt is a tool. Fact 1, he began, enunciating. Someone wrote asterisk Lyosha star. That means they know a name that should not show up in any corporate database. It's from before. Outside the circuit. Agreed. Fact 2, they know I am here, in this room. So either real-time surveillance, or a leak about my route to get here. Or prediction, Edward finished. Part of a script that required you to come to me. Fact 3, Alex went on, ignoring the chill that came with that. The message is trying to plant distrust in asterisk you star. Or more precisely, in your video source. In the possibility of objective verification. Edward nodded without looking away. Good. Now the key question, who wins if you stand up right now and walk out of here? Who benefits if you end up completely alone? Alex looked at him. The answer was simple, ugly, honest as a slap on bare skin. Whoever wants me to have 0 channels left for reality checking. So I can only trust the version they feed me. Exactly. Edward allowed himself a thin, almost invisible smile. Which means there is a high probability they're trying to push you out of the only place where the rules are dictated not by their procedure, but by the old-fashioned search for truth. Alex clenched his fists under the table. Inside him everything screamed for immediate action, leave, run, change cities, erase traces. But he remembered Ingrid in the alley, asterisk they love running. Running is fear. Fear is weakness. Asterisk and Mark S. voice in the recording, asterisk do not answer questions you do not have to answer. Asterisk he drew a deep breath, tasting dust, old paper, his own sweat. Then I stay, he said, quiet but clear. Edward nodded as if ticking a box on an invisible report. No triumph in his eyes, only cold, professional recognition. The panic test had not been passed. Good, he said. Then the next part will be even less pleasant. Because we not going to waste time guessing who sent me that video. We going to talk about what you do not want to talk about. What your brain resists thinking. My mentor. Your mentor, Edward confirmed. And the nature of the order of which he may have been a part. Alex fell silent. The room's quiet thickened like resin. Edward opened the folder of copied old registers, carefully pulled out a sheet covered in columns, and laid it in front of Alex. This was not accounting in the usual sense. It was discipline crystallized in ink, Latin abbreviations, strange marks, sums, roots. And in the margins, several symbols that were not decoration. Strict. Geometric. Unartistic. Protocol seals. When the Templars were destroyed, Edward began, and his voice took on a lecturer's even cadence. They destroyed the signboard, the public structure, the chivalric order. But not the function. The function, logistics, distance financing, building trust between strangers, protocol discipline, was too valuable. You do not burn functions at the stake. You migrate them into a new form. You said they were rewritten. Yes. And rewrite does not mean simply hide. It means build a new legend, one everyone will believe. Even the ones who think they are enemies. Alex looked up, resistance in his eyes. The history he knew was linear, beginning, rise, pyre, end. A staged ending snapped that line and turned the end into a door. You re-saying the execution was staged? Edward did not answer right away. He stood, went to the wall, and took down a reproduction of an old engraving, a pyre, figures in hoods, a crowd with indifferent faces. At the bottom, in Gothic type, a caption, ***finis***. In textbooks, yes, the end, he said, returning. In archives not meant for public eyes, different. There are inconsistencies. Testimonies that do not exist. Mentions of a man who vanished not like the dead, but like a variable removed from the equation. A pop culture image flared in Alex's mind from half-forgotten articles, the sleeping Grand Master. Jack de Molery, dead in the official story, sleeping in the legend, waiting, preserving strength. You mean de Molery, Alex said. I mean the function, Edward corrected. But yes. His name is a convenient label. He returned to the table and said the next line so softly Alex almost did not catch it, the execution may have been a transfer procedure. The most important procedure. Alex felt something inside him give way, crack under the weight of the logic. History as spectacle. Death as right. Why? He breathed. Edward did not answer right away. He pulled another folder, modern this time, and set it beside a financing graph that looked unnervingly like the one Alex had been studying. And there, near the bottom, faint but unmistakable, the same strict symbol appeared again. Because the order needs continuity, Edward said, and the word landed like a law of physics in this new world. Not romance. Not revenge. Not secret power. Continuity of control. If the public Grand Master is removed, authority has to pass without a break, without a pause, without a moment an outside observer could freeze and label as transfer. Otherwise the circuit tears. Trust collapses. The word circuit clicked in the silence like the last pin sliding into place. So, Alex said slowly, piecing the thought together shard by shard, if the execution was staged, then the real purpose was the handoff. Legitimate, but invisible. Exactly. Edward nodded. And then there rests the only question that actually matters, to whom? Alex felt his mind, honed on algorithms, start building a tree of hypotheses. A successor. A hidden council. A banking wing that had always held the real levers. And you think that line never broke? I do not think Edward corrected. I see its traces. In your graph. In your code. In that cleanliness that's been following you. He tapped the sheet with the chain of funds. What you call an offshore scheme is the modern interface of the same medieval machine. Back then, commanderies and letters of guarantee. Now, trusts in neutral jurisdictions. Back then, a wax seal confirming the sender's identity. Now, a cryptographic signature embedded in the architecture of code, confirming a transaction's legitimacy. Alex stared at the pages, two feelings fighting inside him, an icy dread and a strange, almost perverse recognition. He could see the elegance of the system. Its flawless logic. But where am I in all of this? He asked, and it was not a complaint, it was a demand the equation answer him. Find the unknown. Edward looked at him directly. Mercilessly direct. Your job on the project is not just to build a quantum-resistant encryption module, he said, quiet, almost intimate. Your job is to build a trust system that can not be broken even in theory. And the Philosopher's stone, if it exists, is the antithesis of trust. It does not break in, it rewrites the foundation itself, who believes whom, and why. A chill crawled down Alex's spine, vertebra by vertebra. You think that stone is part of my code? Not a virus, but a function. I think that stone is the goal of your code, Edward said. And more than that, there's a strong chance you have already written it. Without realizing that's what it was, Alex shot to his feet. The chair skidded back with a loud, piercing squeal, the first sharp, uncontrolled sound of the whole evening. It hit the room like a glitch, like an error in a quiet algorithm. "No," he said, the word coming out crushed. "I would have seen it. I would have felt it." Edward did not raise his voice. He did not argue. He just watched Alex, and there was no challenge in his eyes, only tired certainty. "Alex," he said softly. "You're already not noticing things that used to be unshakable. Your conversations are shrinking. Timestamps in files are turning impossible. A neighbor who's seen you for 3 years asks, 'Who are you here to see?' Do you really believe you notice a single line, a single module, if someone carefully, step by step, rewrote the context in which you read that code?" Alex opened his mouth, and found no rebuttal. It was like the air had been pulled from his lungs. Because that was the most monstrous refinement of it, Edward's logic did not contradict Alex's experience. It described it. He lowered himself back into the chair, slowly. The motion was heavy, drained, like a man realizing his flare of anger had not been protest at all, but a programmed response. A test. "Then, what do I do?" he asked again, and this time there was no defiance, no hope. Just a request for instructions. The next step in a survival protocol. Edward exhaled, long and worn, as if bracing himself to open the heaviest door. "We're going to test you," he said. "Not as a person. Not as a victim. As a carrier. As a potential carrier of code whose memory may have become an editing surface. We'll look for the boundary, the point where your own handwriting ends and the embedded pattern begins." A nausea rose in Alex, not physical, existential. Like being asked to dissect himself while still alive. "How?" he asked, a single syllable. Edward took the flash drive labeled threshold. "We start with anchors. Not digital, material. Ordinary. Things you did when your reality was still whole. When you were sure you were you." Alex remembered. The magnet on the fridge. The paper notebook. A pen that left ink. A bag of cheap detergent bought as an alibi. Without speaking, he pulled a worn scrap of paper from his inner pocket, unfolded it, and set it on the table in front of Edward. 3 words in his handwriting, which now looked strangely foreign, like it belonged to somebody else, *milk, bread, coffee. Edward studied it not like a note, but like an artifact. His gaze was sharp, evaluative, like a forensic examiner searching for micro-traces. "Good," he said. "That's your baseline. Now the next step will hurt more." He reached into a desk drawer, pulled out a small but heavy camera on a tripod, and set it so the lens stared straight at Alex. "No," Alex cut in at once, instinctive. "No recordings. No eyes." "This is not for the network," Edward replied, calm, almost mechanical. "It's for you. Later. So when the doubt gets too loud, you tell have proof. So you will not argue with yourself, you tell be able to see." The phrase *argue with yourself* touched something deep and dark that Alex had been refusing to touch, the possibility that one day his own inner voice might turn foreign. Edward continued, his tone steady, like a surgeon before an operation. "I want you, on camera, to write a small fragment of code. On paper. Not perfect. Not deployable. Just how you write for yourself. How you think." A faint wave of relief moved through Alex. Code. This was his territory. His language. He took the pen, found a clean sheet in the notebook, and quickly, almost without thinking, sketched a few lines of pseudocode, a simple data integrity check. He could write it half asleep, under stress, in any place, at any time. It was his signature in pure form. Edward looked at it carefully without comment. "Now," he said, "write the same thing again. The same logic. but differently. Deliberately change the structure. Variable names. The order of operations. Make it uncomfortable for you. Alex frowned, resistance rising. Why? Because if that stone is a trust rewriting instrument, Edward explained, then it's thus very likely embedded not in random places. It loves habits. It hides where you write like always. Where your brain drops into autopilot. Where you are most predictable. Alex felt a sharp, prickling recognition. He had always valued clean, uniform code. The same patterns. The same shorthand. It was his strength, readability, predictability for the team. And it was his Achilles heel, templates. He forced himself to write the second version. Slowly, with effort, like writing with his non-dominant hand. It came out ugly, inelegant, but functionally identical. Edward took both sheets and placed them side by side. See the difference? He asked softly. I see that the second one disgusts me, Alex said, honest. Exactly, Edward nodded. And now I'll show you why that matters. Why your habits can become someone else's weapon. He turned the old laptop toward Alex and opened a file. Not from Alex's working project, something deeper, a service archive. The file name was bland, continuity patch. Log. Inside were lines of code. And among them, a function. The same one. The one Alex had just written in the first, habitual way. The same patterns, the same lazy optimizations, the same micro choices you make not because they are perfect, but because *it's fine, it's an internal script. *the signature. His signature. Or a workshop-grade imitation so accurate it made his hands shake. Alex felt his palms go damp and cold. The air in the room seemed to thin. This? He could not finish. Yes, Edward said, short. Your style. Or its perfect cast. Alex stared at the screen, and the world around it began to swim, the edges losing their sharpness. Where did you get this? He managed. Edward answered after a long, heavy pause. From inside the system, he said so quietly the words barely carried. Do not ask which node. Then he added, and the fatigue in him sharpened into something harder. And here's the next part. The worst part. He pointed to a line at the bottom of the file. According to the timestamp, this file was created before you started working on the project. By 1 month. Something knotted in Alex's stomach, tight, icy. His heart skipped. A timestamp. Again. That cursed, impossible timestamp. So, he whispered hoarsely, they are not just forging the past. They are changing chronology. The sequence of causes and effects itself. Edward nodded, and the same freezing clarity reflected in his eyes. They'd rechanging reality's agreement with what was. And if you do not have material anchors, one day you'll accept their chronology as your own, and you will not even notice the moment you cross over. Alex sat, staring at the screen, and understood, this was no longer about saving a project, a career, even a life. It was about saving the source, the continuous I that can look back and say, that was me. The phone on the table, face down, vibrated again. Short, insistent. Edward did not take his eyes off Alex. Do not pick it up, he said evenly. Alex did not move. But the vibration came again. Steady, methodical, without gaps. Rhythmic, like knocking. Like a loop in his test logs. Like the shape of the procedure itself. And suddenly Alex understood. This was not an invitation to a conversation. It was a timer. A countdown to something. He flipped the phone over, almost violently. On the screen, over the message notification, a video icon glowed. A play button. No number. No sender. Just a caption, black on white, watch. This is the last one. Edward slowly reached toward the phone, not to take it, but as if feeling the space around it, checking whether touch itself was safe. "Do not," Alex said. "We have to," Edward replied, quiet and unmoving. "Because if it's a trap, we've been inside it since the moment you walked through that door. And if it's the last message from someone who tried to warn you, you do not get to ignore it." Alex stared at the icon. His finger would not obey, it hovered a hair's breadth above the glass. In his head, Marcus S. line, scratched into his notebook, echoed, *, do not answer questions you do not have to answer. *, this was not a question. It was a challenge. A final test. He tapped play. The recording was shaky, the sound poor. Ingrid's face appeared. She was sitting somewhere inside a moving car, or a room with dead walls. Light fell from the side, throwing half her face into deep shadow. Her voice was even, but beneath the hiss fatigue seeped through. And something new. "Hurry. Real hurry." "Alex," she said, eyes fixed on the camera as if she could see him through time. "If you re-watching this, it means you made the right choice. And the wrong one." At the same time, a small, soundless smirk twitched at the edge of her mouth in the shadow. "Do not trust Edward completely. He's not an enemy. But he's a channel. A very convenient channel. You can feed controlled truth through him. A version that pulls you in the needed direction, but feels like revelation." Alex felt his throat tighten. Slowly, he turned his eyes toward Edward. Edward sat utterly still. His face was a mask, no anger, no fear. Total control. "Stone." Ingrid continued, her voice dropping, as if she leaned closer to the microphone. "And one more thing. You think that stone is just an algorithm hidden in your code. That's only the top layer. The second layer is in a person. In whoever holds the key to activate it." She leaned in until her face nearly filled the frame. Her eyes, always so analytic, burned now with a strange, almost feverish shine. "That key is your old name, Alex." Ice ran down Alex's back. "Lyosha," Ingrid said, and it did not sound like a way of addressing him. It sounded like speaking a password. A ritual word. It's not nostalgia. Not just the real you. It's an access marker. They not initiate the stone procedure on Alex Severin. That identity is a product, an interface, a shell. They need access to the one who came before. To the core. To the point your continuity of self branches from. The image jolted, the sound dropped out for a moment, leaving only static. If they start calling you by that name, it means the calibration procedure is complete. They are already close. And if you see a threshold, do not cross it alone. Threshold is not a geographic point. It is an event. A decision point after which there is no return. The screen flickered, the image smeared. Her voice broke, dulled. "I made my choice," Ingrid forced out. "Now it's yours. And remember, sometimes the only way to stop them from launching it is to launch first." But not that. The video cut off. The screen went dark, reflecting Alex's pale, distorted face. Silence settled in the room, deep, ringing, crushing. Alex stared at the black rectangle of the phone like it was an open hatch into another dimension. He felt like someone handed two mutually exclusive verdicts and told to choose one, only to be punished later for choosing wrong. Edward spoke first. His voice was dry, emotionless, like a system reading its conclusions. "Now you understand why I said you'd a pretext," he said. "And why I insisted on that phrase in the museum. I exist." Alex looked up at him. His gaze was hollow, scorched out. "She said my name is the key," he whispered. "Yes." Edward nodded. "And now you refacing the choice you wanted to avoid. A choice between two forms of self-destruction." "What forms?" Alex's voice did not sound like his. Either you stay Alex with a convenient, legitimate, sterile identity inside their system and let them slowly, neatly erase Lyosha as a conflicting, unnecessary file. Or Edward paused just enough for the word to cut. Or you try to bring Lyosha back. And then you do not become a person. You become an interface. A living port for launching the very procedure you were warned about. Everything inside Alex tightened into a painful knot. This was not a choice between good and evil, between rescue and ruin. It was a choice between two kinds of death of the self, between erasure and use. He looked at the notebook. At the word threshold on the flash drive. At the folder with the Latin motto, non omnis moria I will not wholly die. At the pathetic, tender grocery list, the last anchor in a world where even memory had become unreliable. You said threshold is in Boston, Alex said, and it was not a question. It was the next step, stated like a line in an algorithm. Edward nodded. And now you know why, he said. Because what less there is not an artifact, not an archive, not a symbol. It's less the source of continuity. The core everything is built around. Alex remembered the name in the folder, Zach de Molery. The last Grand Master who might not have died, but become something else. A node. A constant. A point legitimacy passes through, trust, the very ability to be the order across centuries. You want me to go there, Alex said. I want you to survive and keep them from completing the procedure, Edward corrected. But yes. Boston is the next logical node in the graph. The point where the threads converge. Alex slid the phone back into his pocket, slowly, like he was not hiding a device but a foreign, living part of himself that had just spoken from the void. Then we go, he said. The decision was not heroic. It was engineering. If a problem has no solution under current conditions, you change the conditions. Move to a different coordinate system. Edward nodded and lowered his voice to a near whisper. And remember the most important thing. If, on the way, at any moment, you feel yourself starting to doubt not the facts, but yourself, do not argue with the voices. Do not try to convince yourself. Record. Write. Draw. Hold on to material traces. That's the only weapon against a procedure that works on memory. The only thing that not be remotely edited. Alex stood. His body felt heavy, filled with lead, exhaustion and fear. And at that exact moment, as if in answer to his movement, as if on cue, sound carried through the thin wall of the studio from the building corridor. Not a fist pounding. Not footsteps. A short, crisp, dry click of an electronic lock at the front entrance. And immediately after it, a calm, even, impersonal voice so close it sounded like the speaker was already in the room. Open up. This is for your safety. Edward lifted his eyes very slowly and met Alex's stare. And in that second, in that soundless exchange, Alex understood, finally, with all the clarity of someone who has already been cornered, threshold is not a place in Boston. Threshold is here. The lock's click was so clean, so precise, it felt like it had not happened in the hallway at all, but inside the room, right behind his back. Alex froze with his hand half raised. He'd already been reaching for the desk lamp switch, obeying an old, animal reflex, darkness as cover. But Edward caught his eyes through the thickness of silence and gave the smallest, almost imperceptible shake of his head. No. Do not touch it. In places like this, in games like this, even changing the light became a signal. A light turned off at exactly the right moment was a tag, they re-hear, they know, they re-reacting. You could not hand the procedure clean, unambiguous triggers. Outside, the voice repeated, same level, same impersonal tone, offering safety the way a doctor offers anesthesia before an amputation. Open up. This is for your safety. Edward did not answer. Did not move. He rose from the chair slowly, without fuss, like a man simply deciding to adjust a curtain. But his motion had direction. He walked to the overloaded shelving unit along the far wall, where folder spines blended into a dusty, mottled camouflage. Without looking, he slid his fingers along the rows, not choosing so much as feeling, like reading Braille on cardboard. On the third row, among plain archive boxes, his finger paused for a beat and then pressed, not the folder, but the shelf itself, slightly left of center. A quiet, almost gentle click answered from somewhere inside the wall. Alex watched a section of wood paneling, what he'd taken for a dead veneer, shift outward by an inch. Not a theatrical secret passage. A utilitarian service flap, narrow, unremarkable, the kind you would not notice even if you were staring right at it. Edward turned. Not toward the door the voice was behind, toward Alex. And soundlessly, with a single breath of his lips, "This way." Alex stepped, and at that exact moment a second sound came from the corridor. Not as sharp. Softer, wetter. The click of a card tapped to a reader that should not have worked here. Or should have, but only for the right people. Edward did not speed up. He just moved about 5% faster, exactly enough to keep retreat from becoming panic. Asterisk they love running, asterisk Ingrid's voice surfaced in Alex's head, cold and precise. Running was the sign of a living, frightened creature. And with frightened creatures, the procedure knew what to do. They slipped into the narrow, dark opening. The air inside smelled of dust, old metal, and the faint bite of ozone from ancient wiring, the smell of a place no one lived in, but where something worked without interruption, executing a forgotten function. The flap closed behind them almost silently, leaving only the workshop's muted light outside. And then the voice came again. Closer. Now it was not coming from the hallway, it was right at the studio door itself. Calm, no raised volume. Edward Reed. You have violated the regime. His name did not land like discovery or threat. It landed like notation. A line in a protocol. The system was not searching. It was recording. It had known who was here for a long time, and only now had decided to say it out loud. A cold, tight loop cinched in Alex's chest. Not fear, recognition, they were not just chasing. They were keeping accounts. In the dark, Edward found Alex's hand, touched his wrist, made him still. Then he leaned in so close Alex felt breath brush his ear. Listen. There are 2 exits. One goes down to the service elevator. Smart. Call logs. A camera in the ceiling. The other goes to an old fire stairwell. Stupid. Concrete. No sensors. Choose. Stupider, Alex breathed, no question, an answer. Stupider, Edward confirmed. Old things survive sometimes because nobody bothered to update them. They moved forward, hands grazing walls in near total darkness. The corridor was narrow and low, built for servicing utilities. Alex walked counting steps in his head, not for memory, for rhythm. Rhythm kept his mind from dissolving when reality tried to go liquid. At the next bend, Edward stopped him again, pressing a finger to his lips. Down below, near what should have been the stairwell exit, a dim emergency light flickered. In that bluish wash stood 2 silhouettes. One tall, straight, nearly motionless, a post. The other off to the side, half turned, like a formality, like angle control. The tall one spoke. The voice was flat, without emotion, like an automated announcement. Alex Severin. The name hit not his ears but his spine, low and deep. Not because they'd found him, but because they were saying it here, in the concrete belly of the building, where no digital trace should have led. Which meant their knowledge was not about location. It was about route. About predictability. Then, after a microscopic pause, the same voice said a second name. Softer. Almost thoughtful, as if tasting an old, strange sound. Lyosha. For a moment Alex could not breathe. Everything in him, every cell, howled for him to turn, to strike, to run anywhere, just to stop hearing that word in that voice. But Edward's palm was already on his forearm, not gripping, just asterisk there. Asterisk a tactile anchor. His silence said, you flinch, you lose. You step out of object of procedure, you become target. The tall silhouette did not move a step closer. He simply finished the thought, as if closing a case file. Stop. There is no proof. But the regime has been violated. The voice was too clean, too stripped of human edge to belong to someone driven by anger or ambition. It was the voice of a function. Alex flashed on what he'd de-glimpsed in Edward's folders, unconfirmed mentions, hints of a figure without a face, a man as procedure. The name did not matter. The role did. Mr. Black. Or whoever did his job. Edward leaned to Alex's ear, lips nearly touching skin. Do not argue. Do not answer. Look at me. And then Edward did something completely unexpected. He did not retreat. He stepped forward, but not toward the silhouettes. Toward the bare concrete wall to their right. He put his palm on it like he was checking temperature, and pressed once, short and precise, on a specific spot. A click. Quiet. Almost embarrassed, as if the mechanism hated admitting it existed. Part of the wall, not a door, a narrow vertical panel, slid aside without a sound, opening a black void that breathed out colder, staler air. Not an exit. Not salvation. Another uncounted corridor. Another fold in the building's reality. Edward yanked Alex by the sleeve and they dove inside, into thick, almost tangible darkness. Behind them there was no stop. No shout. No police drama. Only the same even voice, with a change in tone so small it barely registered, like a system encountering an unaccounted variable and simply rebooting the protocol. You are worsening the consequences. And then footsteps. Not running. Even, measured, relentless. The procedure moved to the next phase. The technical passage was dark, but not absolute. Somewhere ahead, around a bend, a tiny green lead winked, part of some forgotten system. They walked hunched under low beams. The metal grating beneath their feet carried a faint, constant vibration, as if the building were a living mechanism and they were crawling through its arteries. Alex felt a fine tremor start up again in his jacket pocket. The phone. It was not supposed to be active. But it vibrated, short, insistent pulses. He did not pull it out. He clenched his hand into a fist, as if he could crush the very fact of the signal, an electronic tentacle reaching for him from outside. Not now, Edward whispered, as if he felt the vibration through his own skin. That's not for you. It's for them. A marker for live signal. Do not give them a point. They emerged into a tiny room packed with electrical panels and boxes, a maintenance closet. The air here tasted of ozone and old age. Without hesitation, Edward opened an unremarkable door into a short first-floor corridor, civilized now, white walls, fire safety notices, the smell of bleach. And at the far end, behind glass, the street. Night. A normal city. Outside, life kept moving. People with paper cups. Laughter spilling from a bar doorway. A couple arguing on the corner. A world where technical passages and lock clicks and voices speaking old names did not exist. Edward threw a quick scanning glance left and right, evaluating not threats but flow. Then he guided Alex onto the sidewalk, not with a jerk, not a sprint, but the casual, slightly tired gait of someone stepping out for air after a long day. The first 10 steps were the hardest. Every nerve in Alex was strung tight, waiting for a hand on his shoulder, for the call, for that calm voice. The word still rang in his ears, Lyosha. It was not a name anymore. It was code. A key someone else held to his temple. Edward moved him through the crowd, choosing a route not by shortest distance but by maximum noise, storefronts, mirrored facades, cafe glass. He did not look back. He watched reflections. Not paranoia, craft. A direct glance over your shoulder was a signal to whoever was tailing you. At the next intersection, beside a newspaper kiosk shouting with neon, Edward stopped. Bought the first magazine his hand touched, paid in crumpled bills, and while turning the change said, as if commenting on the weather. That's it. Return point closed. Not my workshop. Not your apartment. Home in this game is any place waiting for you. They will not wait for us. Boston, Alex said, not asking, stating it as the next step in the algorithm, feeling the word stop being geography and become a command. Boston, Edward nodded. But not on the wings of smart logistics. Not by your digital traces. Not under your name. A short familiar irritation flared in Alex. Again, decisions made for him. He caught it like a fly in midair and crushed it in his head. Irritation was convenient. Human. Which meant predictable. How then? His voice went flat. Edward flicked the magazine toward the river of people, cars, and lights. Bus. Terminal. Cash. Fewer questions. More chaos. And most important, there are always people there who do not care about your legitimacy. They care about the line more than truth. And a line is anonymity. They reached the intercity bus station after evening had fully turned to night. The place was scorched in bright, merciless light with no hint of comfort, plastic seats bolted to the floor, vending machines with petrified sandwiches, signs promising comfort that meant only a roof overhead. No one pretended here. Everyone wanted one thing, to leave. Fast. At the ticket counter, Alex reflexively opened his mouth to say his name, an old ingrained instinct for legitimacy, and stopped in time. Alex Severin stuck in his throat, poisonous and dangerous. Edward stepped forward, blocking him with his body. 2. One way, he told the cashier, a woman whose face expressed only chronic fatigue from numbers. She glanced at her screen, tapped keys, named a price. Edward counted out bills. Paper to paper. No trail. ID, the cashier asked lazily, out of duty, already looking past them to the next person in line. Edward handed over something. Alex did not catch what. The cashier flicked her eyes over it, nodded, returned it. No pause. No database check. It was too smooth to be coincidence. He has his own keys, Alex thought coldly. Too many keys. And right behind it, like an echo, without the ID already be pulled to the side. They sat in the waiting area on hard plastic chairs. Alex took out his notebook, found a blank spread. The pen felt heavy and disobedient in his fingers. He wrote large, pressing hard, forcing the ink to lay down thick, I exist. Then below, in a different hand, more angular, like someone else had written it, except it was still him, Alex, the form. Lyosha, the key. Writing it hurt. But not writing it meant letting the concepts blur, mix, soften. And blurred things were easy to rewrite into whatever template was needed. Edward watched from the corner of his eye, not commenting. Only when the speakers croaked their bus number did he lean in and say quietly, almost confidentially, like warning someone about a trap, now comes a micro scene. Ordinary. Domestic. The most dangerous kind. Remember it. This is how they erase people while pretending everything is fine. They merged into the line at the gate. The attendant, a woman in a uniform vest, wore that same even, professional smile Alex had seen on Sloan, on the bank operator, on everyone who offered safety. She took Edward's ticket, scanned it, waved him through. Took Alex's ticket. Held it to the scanner. A sharp, ugly beep. The smile did not drop. It even warmed, grew more sympathetic. I am sorry, she said, honey sweet. Some kind of error. Your ticket is not active. A familiar chill ran up Alex's back. He'd seen this play in a dozen versions. One plot, one purpose, create a point of refusal, extract him from the flow. But he started, and caught himself in the stupidity of it. Explanations were part of the script. No big deal, the woman cut in, her tone almost maternal. It happens. Just step over here, please. We can fix it quickly. Asterisk over here. Asterisk the hook phrase. There's no crowd there. No witnesses. It's less quiet, bright, and convenient for processing. Alex had already taken half a step, obeying the training of politeness, and stopped. Edward laid his palm on the turnstile post, leaned toward the woman close enough that she instinctively drew back an inch. This is one purchase. 2 tickets, he said calmly, without raising his voice, but each word drove like a nail. Your system did not update. That's your problem. Not ours. Her smile trembled, but did not fall. She scanned again. Same beep. See, she said with a small apologetic sigh. Step to the side. It's for your safety. Hearing that sacred phrase, Alex felt something inside him turn to glass, thin, sharp, ready to shatter. Edward did not argue. He just stepped between Alex and the side, blocking it with his body. And he said something so quietly it seemed only the woman could hear, but Alex caught fragments. You want a scene right now? Here? Want these people, a tiny nod toward the line, to pull out their phones. You want an incident in your log instead of a quiet resolution. The woman's smile stopped moving. Plastic. Her eyes flicked past Edward and Alex. The line shifted. Someone grumbled. Someone stared. A teenager with headphones pulled out a phone, not to film, just bored, but it was enough. And then, as if by magic, as if an invisible hand pressed a button, the scanner beeped differently. A green, permissive sound. Go ahead, the woman said, and there was no honey left in her voice, no sympathy. Only tired notation, the incident is closed. Too expensive. Alex stepped through, sweat cold along his spine under his clothes. He had not been let through. He'd been returned to the flow because extracting him had become costly. Noise had beaten quiet. They boarded the bus, which smelled of stale fabric and antiseptic. Sat mid-coach, where faces were less visible from outside and where more bodies pressed around them. The engine roared, the bus shuddered, and started rolling. The city outside slid backward, turning into a shimmer of lights, a flat set. Alex stared at the glass and thought, even this motion was not freedom. It was a change of cage. The object being transported from one control point to another. Edward stayed silent, letting the thought settle, letting it become his. The pocket vibration returned. Once. Pause. Twice. 3 times. Methodical. Insistent. Not a ring, a probe. A test, will you answer? Will you obey the reflex? Alex did not reach for the phone. He pulled out the notebook, opened to a fresh page, and wrote hard, sharp, with pressure, Don-a-T answer. The bus rolled onto the highway. The world outside became a string of lamps and the flickering shadows of guardrails. People around them sank into sleep, faces buried in jackets, earbuds, screens. Someone watched a series. Someone scrolled a feed, unaware that a man sat a foot away whose existence could be voided with one smile at a service counter. Alex felt the boundary between waking and sleep grow thin, dangerous. In the dim, under the engine's monotone, memory began to lose edge. Yesterday drifted away like shoreline. He gripped the rough cardboard cover of the notebook, his material anchor. And then, from nowhere, an image surfaced in his mind. Not his. A foreign insert shot, sharp as a spliced frame in a film, a fire long dead but hot in memory, a crowd of indifferent faces, and at the center a figure in rough linen who did not scream, did not struggle, just looked. Looked straight at him, at Alex, through time and the screen of memory, as if waiting for a sign. A continuation. Alex blinked hard. The picture vanished, leaving only a stubborn metallic taste of blood on his tongue. Not imagined. Real. He leaned toward Edward, his whisper ragged with strain. Is this normal? That I feel like I remember something I could not have seen? Edward did not turn. Did not look surprised. He just nodded, staring at the seat back in front of him like he'd been waiting for this exact question. "Welcome to Threshold," he said quietly. "Now the main thing is not to confuse what's yours with what they're reloading into you. Like test data." The bus carried them into the night, long, impersonal. And somewhere behind them, in the city that still pretended to be normal, the procedure did not sleep. It kept its protocol. No longer about a regime violation. About object movement. And movement is data, too. It can be catalogued, analyzed, predicted, and filed.